Councilmember Brand, Councilmember Brandow, Councilmember Capriolio, Councilmember Olivier, Councilmember Quintero, Councilmember Soria, and Council President Baines.
Here. I don't know why I did that. We're going to all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Salute. All right. So good morning. Today will be the last day of our departmental budget hearings. Today we have personnel, police, office of the mayor, and city manager, and the city council. Today we can, obviously you can make an amendment, clarify, withdraw, or make new motions at any time of today or Tuesday prior to our voting motions. And as you can see, every night all current budget motions and directions were provided to you via email that are in the hopper. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jane for personnel.
Good morning, Council President, Council members. Personnel Services Department starts on page B, 117 of your budgets. This is both a general fund and an internal service fund. The general fund funds their general operations, their administration, organizational development, training, and labor relations. This department also houses the workers' compensation, property liability, and unemployment funds. The department will generate $23.4 million in internal service funds revenue, which is an increase of approximately $1 million over the FY15 budget. This reflects a reduction to property and liability and an increase to the workers' compensation fund due to claims and the 3-year rolling average and the requirements of keeping that fund whole. In expenditures, an increase of 1.9% or $500,000 compared to the FY15 budget. They are adding 1 human resources analyst and additional appropriations necessary for the anticipated increase in insurance premiums. A second human resources analyst is also included, primarily to work in risk and the workers' compensation program. Also, there's $100,000 for the alternative dispute resolution program that has also been included. Insurance premiums are increasing slightly, both to workers' compensation and to property and liability. As I noted, the one analyst is being budgeted in the Human Resources Administration Division, who will help with classification studies, hiring, and data collection. This has been funded through a reduction in appropriations in other non-personnel line items. The second analyst, again, is budgeted in the Risk Management Division and will be responsible for drug testing and training and corrective measures to mitigate losses. That concludes my presentation. I believe the director is here if you have any further questions.
All right, Jeff, did you have anything to say, or are you just here for questions?
Well, I do have a few things, if I may.
Sure.
So, good morning, Council President, members of the Council. I would like to, Jeff Cardell, Director of Personnel Services, I would like to take this opportunity, first of all, to acknowledge all of the staff in the Personnel Services Department for all the efforts that they do that allow us to support the departments and the employees throughout the city. I would also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge that, like other departments throughout the city over the last few years, we've been challenged in trying to maintain service and to provide customer service in the expected fashion consistent with those customer departments that we serve, as well as the public. One of the reasons why we're asking for the 2 additional analysts is that we have a ever-growing demand. We have an ever-growing demand in terms of recruitment and selection, in terms of classification and compensation, and in terms of managing our risks and mitigating losses. So we would ask that you look favorably upon that. I want to give you some statistics for a frame of reference and context. This year alone, this fiscal year alone, we will have processed over 10,000 employment applications. That means there are 10,000 applications that our staff has had to touch in some form or fashion and has referred out to departments. We will have conducted 156 recruitments, which is a 271% increase over FY13. We have over 400 classifications, and of those we have 20% that are more than 10 years old and 40% that are between 10 and 20 years old. All of that work needs to be accomplished in such a way that allows us to ensure that we are meeting the necessary employment standards and the demands of the department. One of the things that I understand the council's been asking is, what are some of the things that we are most proud of? And what are some of our accomplishments? And I would just like to share that we're really excited and proud about the implementation of Supervisor Academy 2.0. We're also very excited and proud of the ability to negotiate a MOU with the FPOA. That was a collective effort with the department and with the Police Officers Association. We're very pleased that we have recently reached an agreement on an alternate dispute resolution with the FPOA, and that will be coming back before this council. We're very pleased about the completion of the class and comp study with CFMEA. We're pleased about the positive claims closing ratio in terms of our liability program. And we're very excited about the reduction of long-term absences. What we're looking forward to are some things such as expanding our program of managing long-term absences with other departments, the development and implementation of driver standards policies and pull notice program throughout the city, and revising performance evaluation systems and standards. An ongoing challenge for us, and you will hear this if you haven't heard it already from others, is the aging workforce and the competitive environment that we're in today. With the economy recovering, agencies, not just the city of Fresno, agencies throughout the state are hiring qualified people. The ongoing challenge for us will be to position ourselves so that we are the employer of choice, so that we are competitive and we can attract those qualified individuals and retain them. Long term, we have some needs, just like other departments, and the budget includes funds for those needs in the long term, such as replacement of the HRIS system. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Quintero.
Morning, Jeff.
Good morning.
Jeff, wanted to ask you a couple questions. One is, can you expand a little bit more about risk management, the staffing, and the other part that you mentioned was the claims closing ratio? Because I'll get calls from folks that say, I turned in a claim 3-4 years ago, nobody responded, or I just got a regular form letter that says it's denied.
Sure. So in our risk management division, we have 2 liability claims analysts and we have a property claims analyst. We also have a risk manager. Our new risk manager is a gentleman by the name of Mike Payne. He's been with us for a couple of months now.
That sounds pretty good.
I'm sorry?
Risk management, and his last name is Payne?
Right.
Okay, good. Very good.
It's better than Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe.
Yeah, that's the law firm.
See, there are some standard processes and procedures, and I don't want to be remiss in remembering that we also have an analyst that focuses on the workers' compensation claims, so that's also in risk. But in terms of liability claims, there are standard procedures consistent with the government code, and more often than not, we have people who are making calls or complaints about issues in which they are displeased with the outcome of a particular claim rather than the staff has failed to provide notice. Liability claims in and of themselves have a shorter lifespan than the workers' compensation claims. With liability claims, they can be accepted or denied, and when they're denied, there's the opportunity for the claimants to file a lawsuit against the city. If there's a valid reason for acceptance of the claim, the liability adjusters, in addition with the risk manager and the city's attorney's office, depending upon the value of the claim, are not opposed to settling those. If there's a valid claim, we want to compensate those individuals for their loss. In terms of workers' compensation, similar to liability, there's a structure, there's a framework in the government code, labor code. There are provisions for acceptance, denial, and delay of claims, and we do so judiciously, we do so appropriately. There are times, again, when people are not pleased with the outcome associated with a particular action, and we have mechanisms in place to resolve those issues. We're excited about the alternate dispute resolution with FPOA because that is a system which will allow for a much more effective and efficient resolution of disputes that arise in workers' comp.
But is it, backing up a little bit, is it standard practice to, let's say you've got an individual or senior or whatever that's walking down the sidewalk in a neighborhood, it's raised up, they trip over, they file a claim, and then they get a letter of denial right away?
It would not be the standard practice to provide a letter of denial right away, no. It would be a standard practice for us to conduct an investigation to determine whether or not there are facts that support the claim. There is a standard procedure after 45 days if there isn't a basis for us to pay the claim based on the investigation to issue a letter of denial at that point in time.
Okay, and what about the individual, the property owner that has a tree on the park strip in front of their home, and it's an older neighborhood, and those roots keep going into their sewer system, and we don't help them out?
Well, it depends on the circumstances. We need to better understand. And
a lot of circumstances was no.
Yeah, if I recall the situation correctly, which it's my understanding that there are some issues that we're resolving to the extent that we can, and I hesitate to comment about a specific case here.
No, I mean I'm not thinking of any specific case. I'm just saying these are the calls that we get from folks in older neighborhoods, live there 30, 40 years, and here's the roots coming into their system, and they said, I didn't plant the tree, the city maintained it, and yet it's plugged up my sewer line, and I'm having to pay $3,000, $4,000 at a whack to get it cleaned up. The city will come out and say, well, it's not our responsibility.
And that may be the case, depending upon the circumstances. There could be valid reason for us to deny that claim. There also could be a valid reason for us to accept the claim. Depends upon the ordinance that we have on the in terms of the municipal code, and who's responsible for the lateral, and who's responsible for the maintenance of the trees.
Okay, then can I get a list of the number of claims that have been filed for the sewers, and how many were denied and how many were approved to be paid?
Sure.
I'd like that. Don't look at Bruce. He's looking at you, Bruce. Oh, that's what it is? I thought it was in the tie. He keeps going like this. Yeah, if I can get a list of that, because, I mean, it just seems that it happens so often, and, there's a lot of frustration and also on the pocketbook as well.
Sure.
The number of folks that you have in claims, you said you had 2?
We have 2 risk analysts who manage the liability claims, and one that manages the property claims, and one that manages workers' comp. At any given point in time, on average, there's probably 100 litigated claims in liability, not counting all of those that are unlitigated.
Do you have, for the number of claims that are filed, do you have enough staff for that, for those 2?
I would suggest at this point in time, yes, we do.
Okay. Seems like for a city this size, we should have more folks in those positions.
I wouldn't be opposed to the addition of staff, but that is a balancing test.
No, I understand.
We're just one department. There are other needs throughout the city as well.
a good department head answer. Okay, let me think here. Okay, that's all I have for now,
Okay.
but I really look forward to getting that report. It just seems that the one that it really has an effect on, I mean, you've got single-family households now, you've got a lot of seniors that paid their homes off, and now they're faced with having to come up to pay for the, cleaning out the sewer lines and that type of thing. So it's pretty difficult, and then with the economy, having been the way it is. So, okay, thank you. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Caprielio.
Thank you. Speaking of trees, about a year and a half ago or so, I had talked about taking the tree status and having the tree, if it's a city tree, that we accept responsibility, like we're talking about, that Sal brought up. If it's not a city tree, then it goes to the homeowner, and then they own the tree and the results of the tree growth or whatever. I'd like to maybe bring that up again or get some traction with that. The problem with it was that people thought that then the homeowner will just take the tree out, and that may be an option. Sometimes the root system is so thick that you don't really have a choice. And I think to resolve that, we could actually include in a resolution or an ordinance that says you have to plant a crepe myrtle or some drought-tolerant tree in lieu of a tree being taken out. But to me, that was a viable option. Either we own it and all the problems, or the homeowner owns it with all the problems, and then expedite their process to resolve that issue, whether it's taking out the tree or trimming the roots or whatever. So maybe we should talk about that and see what your staff thinks would be the best way to handle that. But
We could certainly take a look at that.
yeah, I think it's something we should consider because, again, those complaints come up, and it's usually $4,000 for sewer root systems, and it's, D4 has a lot of older homes, and that's how that came up for me. You mentioned a risk analyst. When you have those questions come up, do you confer at that point with the city attorney's office, or you try to resolve it in-house and then eventually take it to the city attorney if you have some deeper risk questions? How do you guys relate to each other?
Well, I'd like to think we relate to each other very well. Having said that.
That was a straight line for you, so good job.
Thank you. Having said that, if the exposure of the particular claim is something within the authority of the risk division, more often than not, we're able to handle that ourselves. Unless there's some unusual questions, then we meet on a regular basis. The risk analyst and the risk manager meets with the chief assistant city attorney on a weekly basis, actually, to discuss a whole host of claims issues. So we have a regular and ongoing communication between the two offices so that we are continuing to assist and support one another in resolving our claims issues.
And that seems to have resulted in part to the claims reduction aspect of the...
It helps. It certainly helps.
Good. And then alternative dispute resolution, we haven't got that in full gear yet?
No, that item is coming back to the council this week for adoption. We had a workshop a month or so ago, and subsequent to that workshop, the FPOA has ratified the agreement and the savings agreement, so we're bringing that back for council adoption this Thursday.
Perfect. And I'm sure your leadership and your team's leadership has resulted in the reduction of absences. You brought that up.
The reduction of long-term absence has been through continuous collaboration with departments. We have had a significant focused effort with the police department. We have had a significant focused effort with the third-party administrator, ARLA, and the use of a nurse case manager to help facilitate the provision of appropriate medical care and to resolve issues absent the alternate dispute resolution to the extent that we can, so that we could facilitate continued progress on a given claim. In addition to that, we have been working with departments on what is called an interactive process to address limitations and restrictions that employees have to determine whether or not we're able to accommodate them in their existing class, another class, or if we have to separate them for medical reasons. So that all of that has worked in reduction of the long-term absence.
Well, great team effort there, and your division is doing a great job. And these are all impressive things that you folks have achieved over this past budget year, and continue the good work. It's really, I think it really makes a difference, and you're setting a trend that's to be admired.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. Thank your team, too.
Councilmember Brandow.
I'm not sure which one will help me more on this one. On the from the line item budget, item number 59120, it's facility repair and replace program. It's been 000 in recent years, and it jumped to $40,600. Any indication what that is, or could you let us know?
Yeah, actually, that's a new line item. It was split out from the regular facilities line item to clearly identify the projects that will be undertaken for City Hall this next year. It appears in every department that's within City Hall, so it's not just in personnel.
Okay.
It's in all the other departments that are within City Hall as well. And
So
it's
it's
to
a new
replace the
line
carpet.
item.
It's to maintain the building and that sort of thing. So it's just been split out from the prior facilities line item.
Okay.
So, and it's for special projects specific to City Hall.
And then does each department responsible for certain projects within that overall line item budget?
Well, facilities is responsible for all of those projects.
So that's the total?
No, that's just personnel's total, and it's based on a square footage of the
That's what I was
the
gonna
space
get
that they
at.
inhabit.
So it's just divided by
Yeah.
square footage percentage of the need of the department?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, cool. Jeff, most of my questions were asked by Councilman Quintero, so they had to do with the personnel, a couple of the personnel changes. So it looks to me like some of the other departments we've talked with, you're kind of moving personnel around, and you're really only adding 1.5 people to the department.
It is, in fact, 2 analysts that we're adding.
Yes.
There is a definite need in the recruitment in classification section of the Department of Operations, as we call it. And just to give you some additional context, on average, we are handling at any point in time probably 60 to 70 recruitments. And we have a definite need to balance out that workload so that we can conduct recruitment in a timely fashion to help meet the needs of the respective departments, and also ensure that we have an appropriate classification and compensation plan in place. And the classification plan in and of itself takes a significant amount of effort to ensure that we are adequately and appropriately defining the classifications so that we are recruiting for the right position, the right person for the right position. On the other analyst, again, is in the risk side, where we want to continue to focus on mitigating losses to the extent that we can, and we want to ensure that we have appropriate measures in place, such as a driver standards policy, and that we are on a consistent basis applying those standards, and that we are reviewing motor vehicle records to ensure that the individuals have a valid driver's license that does not put us in a position of jeopardy.
Yeah, and it kind of threw me off. It kind of threw me off where we were adding people and losing people, because right now you just told me we're adding people in risk management, but when I just glance, a casual glance at this schedule shows that we're actually losing a portion of a person in risk management. So right now, in red line copy, so it looks like we're losing 3 people from the Human Resources Operation Division and a quarter of a person from risk management. But those are really getting shifted to Labor Relations Division and Loss Control.
Reallocation.
Yeah. Okay.
And these analysts, while those responsibilities would be their primary functions that I described, they would be generalists. And they will help support labor relations. They will help support safety and training. They will help support interactive process. They will help support they'll help support every function in the department.
Okay, cool. That's all. Thanks, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Soria.
So I just have one last question. I know some of the other questions I had have been answered, so I appreciate that. On page 98, I was just wondering in terms of under the property liability self-insurance, the $3 million that was newly proposed in this last year's budget and then continues as a proposal in terms of it's detailed under contingency and reserve. So if you can just explain that.
On page 98, yeah,
Page-
that's, the $3 million is the SIR, which is the retention that we have to maintain. It's basically the city's deductible because we are self-insured. And so our insurance carriers require that we keep a minimum balance of $3 million in that account. Nothing is actually spent out of that account. That's a contingency line item. And so whenever they seek or need to spend out of that line item, they must come back to council in order to move it. But that's where we house that retention. And so it's a requirement of the city's insurance companies.
What did we do prior to this fiscal year? Because it shows zero for 2000.
Well, right, because we don't spend, those two first columns are actuals. And so we don't
don't
actually spend any money out of those line items. You'll see it in other line items, you'll see it in risk claims, you'll see it in refunds and claims and that sort, and insurance premiums and legal fees and that sort of thing. So we don't actually spend any money out of that line item. That's why it's zero.
So, and it continues to be carried over
Yes.
as we move forward?
It has to be maintained.
So once the books are closed, we'll also potentially see zero under the
Yes,
fiscal
you
year?
will. You will see a zero next year as well.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
All right, Jeff, just a couple questions. So you kind of in your remarks, you kind of touched off something that I'm curious to hear you expand on a little bit, and that's the recruiting challenge we have here. I think it's I don't want to say it's overlooked because we know it exists, but I don't necessarily think we know the degree at which we have recruiting problems. I know for sure we hear it a lot in the police department, so I talk to the police department a lot, firefighters a lot, so I know that we're having trouble recruiting in public safety, but the breadth of your statement seem to suggest that we may have a larger recruiting problem, citywide, and maybe not just a department or two. Curious to hear your thoughts on how large our recruiting problem is and some ideas to begin to close that gap.
So how large of a recruiting problem? I would say that we are on the let me rephrase that. We're in the midst of a cycle in which there is significant demand for all classifications throughout the region and probably throughout the state. And we have been challenged until recently in terms of ensuring that we had an adequate pool of candidates to provide to the departments, and we have taken steps to address that. Working in collaboration with the police department, for example, we are now on a continuous basis accepting applications for police officers, recruits, laterals, emergency services dispatchers. But we're not just hiring anybody. We are...
Were we before?
I would say that no, we have not.
Okay. I'm just
But I want to be clear about what I mean by that. That when we are hiring candidates, whether it's for a police officer position, a wastewater treatment plant operator, an administrative clerk, whoever it might be, we want to make sure that we not only have the quantity of applicants to review, but that we exercise discretion in making sure that we're hiring the right candidate for the right job. And that takes time, and that takes effort. Especially in the public safety world, as you well know, there's a purposeful background process, not that there isn't with the other classifications, but it is more so in the public safety world to ensure that the people that we are putting on the street are of such good character that we will want them coming into our own homes. Is the challenge going to be ongoing? Yes. Do we have systems in place to help address those needs? Yes. Will we need additional staff? Yes. Will we be able to ensure that we reach the full allocation of positions within a certain period of time? I can't guarantee that. And part of the reason why I can't guarantee that is we will continue to have turnover. We will continue to have folks who will be retiring, as well as adding new positions. So what we have found, though, over the last year is that the city has been able to hire more folks than have retired or who have separated. So now we're back, we're going in the right direction. Do we have room to improve? Yes. Do we have challenges in making sure that we can get the right people, whether it's public safety or otherwise? Yes. In some situations we do. And most recently with CFPEA in particular, we have talked about making some equity adjustments to address some issues in terms of specialized classes, specifically in water. And we may be coming back to discuss those types of things in the future to ensure that we are in a competitive position. But we will do so after we've gone through a thorough analysis to ensure that it's the right thing. Most recently, we've seen in the Fresno County budget talks how competitive it has become in public safety. And Fresno County wants to mirror what we have done in terms of hiring incentives. And that's just going to continue throughout the region and throughout the state, where we're all vying for the qualified candidates. And we want people to come here because they think they can make a difference, and they will make a difference, and we want them to stay.
No, thanks for that, Jeff. And you said a few things that I'm glad you mentioned, because I want to certainly make sure that I just throw this into the mix as you are contemplating, quote unquote, the right person. I think that is a very key aspect of the personnel department, is hiring the right folks, qualified people. That is by far a very tough function to do that. I want to say, in light of that as we are really ramping up systems in place to make sure, because that's kind of what I hear you saying, is we need to, ramp up our systems, make sure that they're running efficiently and smoothly, but still producing the right product, right?
Right.
So that's what I hear you saying, and just in my own head there. I would certainly encourage that as you do that, and I'm supportive of that, by the way. I think that we need to be able to turn around a position, as quickly and efficiently as possible, because obviously we're all public servants here. I just want to make sure that in that mix of hiring the right person, that we are hiring people that are good customer service people.
Yes.
That, to me, that is a quality sometimes overlooked. Not saying the city of Fresno specifically, but just period. In service-related positions sometimes, especially public service. I say this often, that I serve on the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District, and although it's a tenth of the size of our workforce, it's only 300 plus employees. It's not nearly as large as we are. However, they go through painstaking efforts to screen candidates for certain character traits that are conducive to service. And as a result, the number of letters we receive from the business community and the advocate communities about how well our staff interacts with them is staggering. I've never seen anything like it with any board that I sit on. So I say that because I like the idea of being intentional of who we're going after. I hope that one of the things that we're screening for are those that we believe are going to provide good service to people and have an outlook on one of public service first. So I just want to throw that in there. Like I said, I've never seen it done anywhere better than there, but they're very, very intentional about it. I can tell you that they certainly, if all things are equal with a candidate, or even if a candidate, may look better on paper, but if they have a high degree of service, that candidate gets the edge. So it's very intentional. So, in light of this, can you provide, so as we're talking about recruiting, we also have funded vacant positions too, and I'm curious if you can kind of give me a list of the funded vacant positions we have, and how, and the ones that have been funded, that have been vacant for longer than 6 months. I'm just curious to see where we're at with that.
Sure, we can do that. Right now, we have probably over 275 vacant positions throughout the city.
Okay, and this is not necessarily you have to have it by the time we adopt the budget, but just something I'm just curious to see, something to kind of roll around in my head and see where we are and see what we're doing, just to kind of take a snapshot in time, because I'll ask you for it again later to see, maybe mid-year or something like that, to see if we're improving. So I certainly would appreciate that. Sure. All right, thanks. Those are really all my questions.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm going to go out to the public just to make sure if we have any members of the public that want to comment on personnel. I see a few members in the public sitting there. Okay, come on down.
Good morning, Council. Dee Barnes, 2607 Fresno Street, Fresno City Employees Association. Thank you for asking questions about the recruitment. CFPEA, which he mentioned, is the supervisory unit. They've been without a contract for 2 years now, and they're going to be voting again this week, possibly to pass it. They had a tie vote last time. Our unit has been without a contract. It'll be a year in August. And one of the things that we are seeing is it's getting more and more difficult to retain good employees and to recruit good employees, especially when the employees that are here are really not recommending the city to friends and family. They're still seeing the fact that even though the city is recovering, a lot of employees are not feeling appreciated. They're not getting raises. Not only are they not getting any of the lost wages back, the city is still actively trying to take wages and benefits away from employees. So I think that's really good that you will request reports to see what the vacancies are, to start looking to see what our salaries and benefits are compared to other areas. It's harder for my members to pack up and find a job that pays enough to pay their moving expenses. So a lot of them do feel trapped and stuck, which does affect productivity, morale, and customer service, unfortunately. You see a lot of people that have the ability, if they have the ability to get out of here, they're leaving. So I would just encourage you to really look at that and talk to some of the employees and some of the labor groups. So thank you.
Thank you.
Marina Magdaleno, Operating Engineers, Local 39, 4644 West Jacqueline. Kind of on the same lines as what Dee is talking about. We have had challenges in the recruitment and the retention of employees in the blue collar. If you look, we have continuous recruitment in some of our classes. If you recall, when Andy Souza was the city manager, there was an attempt to do a class and compensation study, and there wasn't enough money to complete the study, so it kind of died. And so there have been challenges on the, not only on the salaries, but on the benefits as well, where we lose people to the city of Clovis, especially our mechanics, our trash collectors, because they do pay considerably more than they do here. The city over the years has put more requirements in terms of what they want on employees, but when you start to add up all of the ASC's certifications and the fire this, and this is just blue collar, They want them to have a lot of things, but they don't want to pay them for it. When we negotiated the contract, about 7 years ago, we had such a hard time in water retaining people, especially at the treatment plant. And so we got around that by giving, site pay and cert pay. And to date, we've never folded those salaries into their actual pay. And part of that is because the city, if they do that, it also creates a problem for supervisors who then you have to raise, the rate of pay. So we find ways that are, innovative in some way, but it isn't the answer. And so I would hope that at some point we can get to where we need to be so that we can continue to retain the good employees that we have and we can recruit more good employees into the city. Thank you.
All right. Do we have any other members of the public like to comment on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to our next department. It's going to be the police department. Jane?
Police Department starts on page B, 125. The Police Department is primarily a general fund department, although it receives a significant number of grants. Its total budget for FY16 is proposed at $160.3 million. The department does bring in a certain level of revenue. It is totaling $19.3 million next year, which is $1.4 million above the FY15 amended budget, primarily due to increasing grant reimbursements and also additional reimbursement revenues for additional police officers assigned to the FACS unit, to the solid waste program, and also from Fresno Unified School District. The staffing in the police department's personnel budget totals $132.1 million, which is $3.1 million above the FY15 amended level. This increase primarily corresponds to the addition of 43 funded sworn positions, 15 cadet positions that will be underfilling frozen sworn positions, fully funding the conversion of 9 sworn positions to non-sworn positions, the MOU contract for FPOA that is now in effect, and also pension and workers' compensation charges for next year. Under the new permanent sworn positions, they have a total of 775 sworn positions. The new sworn positions increase totals $2.5 million for both base salary and fringe. Of those 775, 15 are underfilled with cadets, bringing the total sworn funding to 760. There are 33 brand new general funded police officer positions totaling $1.6 million, which are budgeted to be higher on a staggered basis throughout the fiscal year. Other ancillary costs such as computers, safety equipment, etc. are also budgeted for these positions. 4 new police officer positions are also budgeted for the Fresno area or FACS unit. 3 new police officer positions are budgeted to the Department of Public Utilities Solid Waste Program to deal with illegal dumping. 2 police officer positions have been added, which will be assigned to schools, or they are school resource officers, which are being assigned to schools within the Fresno Unified School District. Also funded is a new police sergeant position, which will be overseeing the planning stage of policing key neighborhood areas of Yokomi, Kirk, and El Dorado. The funding for this initiative will come from a Byrne grant and also from Fresno Unified, with the balance being paid by the general fund. As I have noted, there are 15 Cadet 2 positions totaling $600,000 that will be maintained next year. Permanent non-sworn positions. There were 9 positions that were converted in FY15 at the department's request. These positions are now fully funded. In FY16, they include 1 network system specialist, 2 computer system specialist 2s, and 6 property and evidence technicians. The sworn salary increases are also reflective of the MOU that was approved for FPOA. There is a 2% wage increase that is effective on July the 1st, 2015. Other personnel funding changes include pension appropriations, which have declined by $1.5 million, primarily because of the decline in the pension rate that was given to us by the retirement system, and also because of adjustments via the MOU. Overtime appropriations also decreased by $616,000, primarily under the grant programs. Other employee benefits programs declined by about $500,000 due to the removal of the wellness program that was also courtesy of the MOU. And workers' compensation is also increasing in order to replenish the fund and due to the 3-year methodology requiring an increase in that particular expense for the police department. The non-personnel changes include an additional $11.7 million, which reflects a $1.5 million increase compared to the FY15 budget. $215,000 in general fund will be used to purchase operational safety equipment for the 43 new officers. $300,000 will be used to maintain the Skywatch program. This was previously funded out of the asset forfeiture fund. It will now be funded out of the general fund and grant funds. $200,000 has also been budgeted for the body camera storage, tasers, and licensing for the body cameras that have been added. $1.1 million is increased funding for the BSCC grant, and the bulk of the increase is due to a carryover in unspent appropriations. This grant is spent both between the Fresno County District Attorney's Office and the Clovis Police Department. There is also a certain amount of equipment that has been budgeted for this department in the General City Purpose Department, which is summarized on page B128. I'll briefly go over that. There's $80,000 for a boiler for the police headquarters and annex, which is near the serviceable life and needs to be replaced. $250,000 will be spent on the design for the replacement of the PD air handlers in their building, because those are also at the end of the life. $84,000 will be spent for a facilities conditional assessment of the police department's headquarters and annex buildings. $8,000 will be spent for the leasing of 2 CSI vans. $11,300 will be spent for the replacement of 2 prisoner transport vans. $47,000 will be for the replacement of 14 motorcycles, which are also needing to be replaced, and $257,000 for an additional 50 patrol replacement vehicles, which are scheduled to be leased next year. Interdepartmental charges are also increasing by about $1.7 million, primarily for additional desktop leases for the computers that are being replaced due to Windows 7 conversion. Also, $24,000 for new computers for the new positions in the fax unit, solid waste, and the school resources program. Also, $337,000 increase in fleet lease charges, primarily due to the leases for the 50 vehicles that were leased, 50 patrol vehicles that were leased last year and the year before that are now in the police department's budget. The grant budget is also up slightly by $430,000. Primarily, this is a reflection of a decline of about $500,000 in the SLES grant and the $1.2 million increase for the BCSS that I previously mentioned. Also, there is $339,000 reduction in their miscellaneous state grants due to the expiration of various existing programs. This concludes my presentation, and I believe the Chief is available for any questions that you may have.
Chief, did you have any additional remarks?
Just a few remarks. I just wanted to talk about a couple of things in terms of successes in FY15 or calendar year 15, as well as some of the challenges we're facing today. I know you have a lot of questions in terms of hiring and personnel, so I'll wait for that. But first off, let me thank my staff, Renee Wadahira, Cynthia Hanks, for all of their work, and Courtney for the work on the grant. I want to thank them here, because without them, we couldn't do it. But some of the successes that we've had for the last 4 years, ending in December of 2014. We've had consecutive years of violent crime decreases in our city of 4%, 6%, 7%, and then a 7% in 2014. We've also enjoyed reductions in auto theft by 24% the previous year. Shootings were also down 11%. Unfortunately, what we're seeing in calendar year 2015 is those things have changed dramatically. In 2015, violent crime is up in our city, unfortunately, 16%. Much of that is fueled by aggravated assaults and shootings. Shootings are up by 20% this year in our city, 150 compared to 130 this time last year. And also robberies are up by 32%. And traffic collisions also, unfortunately, are up. Fatal collisions are up this year by 7%. Fortunately, injury collisions are down by 13%. And we know we're challenged by a number of factors. One of those is a lack of consequences within our criminal justice system. Probably saw a story in the Bee about an individual that we arrested June 1st for possession of drugs and some other crimes. He was released from jail yesterday morning and within 20 minutes went out and committed a robbery. Those are the challenges we face as a result of a realignment, Proposition 47, and also just the lack of bed space in Fresno County. The other challenge that we face, quite frankly, is our hiring and the inability to keep pace with the number of officers that are leaving this organization. In fact, I can tell you in terms of the numbers, over the last 18 months, we've hired 84 police officers in our department. Unfortunately, we're down to 692 police officers as of this morning. That's from our all-time high of 849, and we're authorized to be at 717 this year. Some of this will change at the end of the month when we have an academy graduating. By July, we will have added another 20 officers, so we should be right around 710, 712 officers as we begin the fiscal year. And then next year, it is our plan to hire in FY16 91 police officers on a staggered basis, which, depending on attrition, we anticipate 33 people leaving in FY16. If that number grows beyond what we think, then we're going to be even more challenged. But we believe that after the end of FY16, we should be right around 770 police officers. We know at the end of the fiscal year, FY16, we have another academy graduating. And so the biggest challenge we face today is trying to recruit officers from other agencies. It just does not appear to be happening the way that it used to when we were in the hiring mode. Our biggest success in hiring currently is out of the police academy. As I said, at the end of this month, we'll be able to hire about 20 police officers that are graduating from the academy. And then again, we will see that in December when we have another academy graduating, and then again at the end of the fiscal year in June. So those are when we're going to be able to make up most of our hiring. We do plan on hiring laterals throughout the course of the year, but it's something that is most challenging for us.
All right, thanks, Chief. I have a few council members punched up. Councilmember Brand.
Well, first of all, after 7 years later, we started. You're doing a great job, you and your department, in very adverse conditions over the last 7 years. With now we're down to 692 with a limited amount of people.
Thank you.
I think I extend that to everybody here in the council. Are we still purchasing jail cells for Fresno County? Is it 4?
Yes, we actually purchased 5 jail beds, and those are primarily for auto theft suspects and burglary suspects, and which is the very reason I believe why we've had such considerable success in auto theft. Auto theft has been decreasing year by year. We're a career criminal auto theft team that we have focuses on the most prolific auto thieves, and we working with the policing districts, making sure that the most prolific thieves are going to jail and staying in jail. And again, last year we were down 24% in auto theft. This year, as of this morning, we're down 11%. So we continue to make strides. In fact, this will be the first time at our current pace that we will have fewer than 3,000 cars stolen in our city in 1 year. And that is significant when you compare where we were in the mid-'90s, upwards of 14,000 cars stolen. So we continue to make strides. The jail beds, I believe, are a big part of that.
Now, I saw in the county budget, they're going to make a substantial increase in their staffing. Will that make a difference?
No, I checked with the sheriff, and the increase in staffing will not equate to an increase in jail beds. That has simply, the additional 100 correctional officers is simply going to be to satisfy a litigation that they were involved in with over the conditions of the jail. And part of that had to do with staffing, but it will not increase bed space.
If they went above that level, is there a point where they could actually help us? Well, one, we wouldn't have to buy the 5 jail cells. How many people would they have to hire to really, get in that situation where the most, prominent serial repeat, car thieves and burglars are kept behind bars and not just you catch and release?
In conversations I've had with the sheriff, it's more of a matter of not necessarily staffing as much as having the bed space available because of classifications. Mm-hmm. Realignment has changed really everything in terms of local jails and the types of offenders that they're now keeping. They're keeping the most serious offenders within the jails, those individuals that used to be in prison. Now that they're in local jails, they have to house fewer of those individuals and have increased staffing because of the violent nature of many of those individuals that are in jail today.
So really, it's this state realignment and Prop 47 are the two main culprits?
Realignment is certainly the one that caused an increase in the jail population of those individuals that used to be in prison. Prop 47 really took away law enforcement's ability to put people in jail that are in possession of drugs. And so one would think that would lessen the jail population, which it has, but whatever it was lessened, it was made up for with those individuals due to the realignment shift. People that used to be in prison are now in jails. The challenge we face that we're seeing is those individuals that we used to arrest for possession of drugs who are out there committing crimes like auto theft and burglary and robberies to support their drug habit. We're not able to arrest them and put them in jail and prevent them from committing those types of crimes in the first place. So we're more reactive in that sense. And whether that's driving our 32% increase in robbery, we don't know. We believe that's a part of it. And but there's other factors involved as well.
So really, the grim reality is that no matter what we do, the problem's systemic. It's beyond the city of Fresno. It's in the criminal justice systems, the courts, probation officers, parole officers, public defenders, right?
Very much correct in the fact that we rely heavily on the district attorney's office, the jails, probation, and the courts to keep crime low in our community. And we know that when other parts of the criminal justice system are not as strong as they once were, what it really requires is an increased presence of law enforcement out in the field to deter crime and apprehend those individuals that are committing crime very quickly. But primarily our goal is to prevent the crime from occurring in the first place, which is why we've had to take steps with reduced staffing this year to utilize those individuals that are not in patrol, those that are in detective assignments, and have those officers sign up for patrol and work some of our shifts out in the field, and why we're also utilizing a substantial amount of overtime right now. On weekends, when we have the highest demand for calls for service, we're having to put order back as many as 16 to 18 police officers to increase staffing out in the field to allow us to respond to calls more quickly as well as to be more proactive. So the shortage of staffing is causing us to use more overtime to do that, but we do need increased visibility out in the field.
Okay. And you mentioned the statistics. Certain categories are going up. How about violent crime this year? How are we doing?
Violent crime is up as of this morning 16% this year.
Right. So we're seeing in some cases some like auto theft progress by having jail cells that keep serial offenders in, but other ones is just stretching like our capabilities, right?
Right. And violent crime it's unique. It's, for example, we have 22 murders this year compared to 24 last year at this time, but robberies are up 32%. Rapes are up substantially this year, 71%, but I will tell you that nearly all of that increase is as a result of the change in reporting criteria under the Uniform Crime Report that was established by the federal government. That changed this year. In fact, we just did the research, and the reality is we would have 2 more sexual assaults or rapes occur this year versus last year. So most of that reporting increase in crime is based on a change of definition, but robberies is for real. We're having a significant increase in street robberies, commercial robberies, business robberies within our city. But violent crime up 16%. Burglaries are down in our city 6.4% this year. And whether or not that's reporting, a lack of reporting, or we don't know. But I can tell you vehicle burglaries are up substantially, 23.6%.
I think a lot of people just, turn a claim into the insurance company. How about identity theft? Is that a growing problem?
Yes. Identity theft has been going up steadily in our city for many years, and I think across this country. Many of the vehicle burglaries that we see today are done for the purpose of stealing identity so that they can commit identity theft. There are a lot of identity theft rings out there, but that crime is substantial. In fact, our investigators have to be very selective in the cases they work.
And one thing I'm seeing in my district, and I'm sure it's probably true in others, is this emerging issue with homeless. And I know they're supposedly half what they had, but I think there's a lot in all the districts out there. I'm getting calls on a daily basis on trails, commercial properties. Of course, recycle centers are all a center, but all over the city. And typically, it's, the answer is, well, we can't do this, we can't do that. Is there any way to comprehensively, go after this problem and find a solution?
Well, I think we've made tremendous success with our homeless population and street people. Number one, by making sure that there are no encampments in the city of Fresno. And our homeless task force, which consists of police, code enforcement, as well as those from waste management, DPU, those individuals are making sure that we are not having encampments in Fresno. Mm-hmm. And that is what was contributing to a lot of violent crime in our city. There is a challenge in the fact that the homeless population or street people are spread throughout Fresno now. Some of that has to do with the fact that they hang out near recycling centers. Mm-hmm. Some of that has to do with the fact that they just feel comfortable in certain parts of the city. But we do know that this budget year, with the hiring of 3 officers from DPU to work on recycling, that they're going to be very engaged in working with our homeless task force throughout Fresno to further address that. The issues that cause homeless complaints in neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods. So I believe we're going to have some impact this year.
But it's primarily a constitutional issue, right, in terms of what you can do, what you can't do?
Yes, we cannot remove somebody from the street because they're homeless. Mm-hmm. We cannot take somebody to jail simply because they are on a street corner soliciting money. We can enforce the median islands, which we do, and we've made progress in that. But the simple fact is, most of these individuals that are out there have chosen this way of life. They're not interested in housing. We ask them many times if they're interested in services and housing vouchers. And some of them, many of them take advantage of it, but it's only after repeated request. It may take our homeless task force 8 to 10 times to work with one individual over a period of 6 months before they take advantage of housing and services. Once they do that, they don't come back out on the streets.
Yeah, I think part of that is mental health, and hopefully that the county is starting to fund mental health and other services, support services that would, hopefully one day pay off in some of our problems too. And I think what we get is we get certain people are very aggressive panhandling, and it causes problems and different issues with you guys. On the equipment, I know you added the motorcycles and the cars and the other stuff. One thing we've talked about since I've been here is the communications equipment. What's the status of that?
For the communication center?
And we
portables.
talked about different. The sheriff has one software, the CHP has another. Any progress in that, Chief?
The Sheriff's Department is in the process of going out to bid for, as I understand it, a new computer-aided dispatch system. We have a existing computer-aided dispatch system that we've had for many, many years from Data 911. That system still serves our needs, but over the next 5 years there's a potential in terms of us needing to replace our CAD. That's a potential. I don't know that's for certain. But at some point in time in the future, I do know that the request for proposal that the county has on their computer-aided dispatch has to be one that will interface with ours. So in terms of communication in the field, we have this last year, thanks to the council and the mayor, we have replaced all of our portable radios out in the field for our officers, so the communication is there. We have hard mount radios in all of our cars that allows for good communication. We are in the process of trying to make sure that we have appropriate towers in the city. We're doing a study actually right now with the fire department for that, because there are some dead spots within our city, more for the fire department than the police department. So in terms of the communication, radio communication, we're doing fairly well, but we got some work to do there. Interoperability with the other agencies is always going to be a challenge, especially out in the county.
And the staffing that you're proposing this year, both the police officers, cadets, support staff, you feel pretty comfortable with that? I realize you always have more of everything, but do you feel that this blending of positions works best given the resources?
Yes. When you consider the number of sworn officers that we've lost, it is imperative that we rebuild those numbers as quickly as we can. We also know we've lost a lot of civilian positions in the organization. We've done some things to automate and outsource to offset that, but we still have tremendous needs there. For example, in records, all of you saw the document that was submitted. We are behind in our ability to do some of the mandated reporting on arrest and statistics to the state. And one of the reasons for that is our records division, our records bureau went from 75 personnel down to today at 22. So it makes it very challenging, and then we also know that there's several of those individuals going to be retiring the next year or two. So we, at some point, are going to need to find ways to either hire people to work in records, underfill police officers to do that, use salary savings to do that. I'm sure this coming year we'll be working with the city manager and the mayor to be able to do that. But we do have a staffing need in record, and it's as well as statistics. Those individuals that audit our data to make sure that we have the most accurate and timely crime data, so that we're deploying our resources accordingly and making sure our strategies are current. So they play a vital role in our department.
Do you think technological innovations, like drones and software, I mean, now most businesses, their voicemail, is so sophisticated now. If you go to a bank, and the recognition, the artificial intelligence, is that something you're looking at down the road?
In terms of automation, before the recession, we had 25 secretaries in the department. We went down to 5. We had to do a lot of things with our voicemail system. We automated our ticket writer system, which minimized the need for clerical support. We outsourced all of our tow releases. At one time, as you know, we would have 80 to 100 people waiting to get tow releases at headquarters. That has all been outsourced to the companies. We outsourced all of anyone that wants a collision report, that has been outsourced to a company. So many of the things that in some respects, when the recession hit, it forced us to look for new ways to do business. In terms of the technology, obviously body cameras are huge in law enforcement today. We will have, at the end of this fiscal year, we will have all 400 of our uniformed officers in the field equipped with body cameras. There is 100 of them today that are equipped. We're going to try to roll out 50 every month in the next 6 months. Our data-driven system, our real-time crime center, all those things are assist or augment our officers out in the field. And we've taken advantage of that technology over the years.
Okay. And I know they've talked about the challenges of hiring people. You and I have talked about it, so I appreciate what you're doing. Okay, that's all I got. Again, thanks a lot, Chief.
Thank you, Councilor.
Councilmember Soria.
Thank you, Chief, for all that information that you provided, the statistics in our current year regarding crime. Of course, we can always use more resources, I think, for every department. But I am encouraged by what I see in terms of this year's budget, hoping that as we move forward, we can do a little bit more, because at the end, this really translates to the safety of our residents and the service that we provide. I do have a couple questions in regards to the budget. I don't know if you or Jane would be the one to answer this, but on page 127, it talks about the Board of State and Community Corrections funds, the AB 109 monies. And so the sentence on that bullet point at the very end says this program's O&M budget includes a little bit over $1 million designated for the Fresno County District Attorney's Office and the Clovis Police Department. Can someone explain that?
Sure. The BSCC monies go to municipal law enforcement agencies throughout California. They're not intended to go to county sheriff's departments unless they are contracted to work in a city. The decision made, number one, is you have to have a fiscal agent. That is the city of Fresno. And then the municipal police chiefs come together to decide how those monies are being spent. They have gone up over the last 3 years. This year, I believe, it went to $1.7 million. A decision was made in our body of police chiefs in Fresno County to do a number of things. One of those was to hire crime analysts. We hired 3 crime analysts in the Fresno Police Department, one for Clovis, one for the East Side Chiefs, one for the West Side Chiefs. So some of the money that, actually the vast majority of the money that comes into us gets pass-through money to those agencies. Another significant funding was to the District Attorney's Office for electronic filing of cases to minimize agencies from having to, for example, on last day filings for criminals, having to drive that package from Mendota or Huron to the District Attorney's Office or from Reedley or Sanger. So now there's a system in place that allows for electronic filing of those agencies on the outskirts. The Clovis and the police department are still not to that point of being able to do that, but we will be shortly. But the impact on us is not as great because we can simply walk across the street with those packages. So there is a substantial amount of money, I believe, about $800,000 or so in carryover money that for the district attorney's office for that purpose. And then the other monies, as I shared with you, is for the analyst for the Clovis Police Department and the analysts that are in the rural areas. Other funding that we're utilizing the BSCC money for will be to pay a portion of the body-worn camera program that we have, as well as adding another crime analyst in FY16. We will be coming back to council with that. And then there's some other funding that will be occurring with transportation, utilizing 2 more Cadet 2s for prisoner transportation within the city of Fresno. And then we will also have monies that go to the Sheriff's Department to provide some prisoner transportation for the rural police department. So that's the bulk of those monies. Again, the vast majority of the monies that we receive go to all of the agencies within Fresno County, including the District Attorney's Office.
And you answered one of the follow-ups that I had in terms of what we're going to fund this year with those monies. But just to follow on that, what other types of activities can we fund with AB 109?
AB, we don't,
Or
well,
with this grant? I
sure,
guess.
okay. There's 2 different types of funding. The AB 109 monies, which goes to the county, those are significant dollars. And those monies are primarily going to the Sheriff's Department for bed space, as well as Probation Department for probation officers. They do fund 1 police officer that we have in the department that's part of the accountability compliance team. So those are separate funds. The BSCC money is really up to the police departments in Fresno County. But I have 1 vote. Even though we have 65 to 68% of the population of the unincorporated or the incorporated areas, I have 1 vote as to how those monies are spent, and that was set up by the state. So we have to collectively come together to decide how those monies are going to be spent.
So they're the ones that make the decision of spending it for body-worn cameras and adding crime analyst.
That's correct. We have to have an agreement amongst the police chiefs in Fresno County as to how those funds are spent. And that's the way the system was set up across California with BSCC monies. And that money is in jeopardy this year. There's $40 million that set aside for BSCC. It's been defunded this coming year, but there's efforts underway to make sure that money is sustained.
And so is that established on an annual basis, what the monies will be spent on?
The allocation, whether or not the state allocates those monies on an annual basis, is up to the state. And how those monies are spent is determined by the local body.
So do we anticipate receiving these funds maybe next year? And if so, do we see the same things potentially to be funded out of those funds?
Yes, we're hopeful the monies are funded again this coming year, but as it stands today, they're zeroed out in the budget. It will take some work to get that money back in. And we are in, since the funding came to us and then we had to build our programs, we're always in arrears 1 year, meaning that if the funding did go away, we would have enough money to fund us through FY16, all of our programs. Then we would have to make a decision how to move forward if that funding did not come back.
So another question, this is related to the community outreach specialist, and I believe that we have budgeted 5 for this next fiscal year. Where will these folks be assigned to in terms of our city?
Those community outreach specialists are actually the crime analyst, correct? When we created the position, recreated the position, we've had crime analysts for many, many years, but they used to be community service officers. Then during the budget reductions, all of those positions went away. When we got the BSCC monies, we wanted to bring back the crime analyst. in working with the personnel department, it was felt it would be much more expedient if we simply put them under the category of community outreach specialists. So those are actually analysts, 3 of them in the city of Fresno, crime analyst, and then 1 of those in the East County and 1 in the West County. So they work for those jurisdictions. The money comes through the city of Fresno and pays for those salaries, but they don't benefit us.
So the 3, so they're not like out in the community?
They are not.
They're analysts.
They're crime analysts that work basically putting together work products for burglaries, robberies, etc. Now, we do have a community outreach in our Mayor's Gang Prevention Initiative, and that is Maggie Navarro, and she is the one that oversees our ceasefire program as well as our Mayor's Gang Prevention Initiative.
I guess I was a little confused because the name Community Outreach Specialist makes it seem like they're out in the community.
Correct.
So I wanted to clarify that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to talk a little bit about the number of positions that we're going to be funding this year. So I'm encouraged. I know that the number that has been out in the media has been 43 new officers. I really want to see if we can break it down to see what it really means this fiscal year.
Sure.
What does it mean in terms of patrol? That's what I'm really interested in. I know that I'm constantly hearing from individuals in my district. We don't see presence here. We don't see the patrolling or the patrols go through our neighborhoods, or even the response times being pretty long,
Yes.
especially when they're some of the minor crimes. It may take more than a day or so to respond. And so just want to kind of go through the number of positions that we are actually funding for this fiscal year, what that means in terms of patrol. So if you can speak to that.
Okay. There's really 3 types. There's funding for Cadet 2s. Those individuals are the ones that do prisoner transportation or individuals that are in the police academy. Okay, and then there's police officers that are ones that are out in the field, and of those, some are designated, some are not designated. The designated that you're going to see in this year's budget of the 43 police officers is 4 of those are going to be funded and designated on that Blackstone corridor, funded by FACTS. And so that's 4 of the 43. They will be in uniform. They will be out there during the hours in which we need them on Blackstone Avenue, dealing with many of the issues that plague that particular area. There are 3 officers that are going to be funded by DPU, and they are for the purpose of working with our homeless task force, specifically for countering some of the recycling problems that we're having today in the city, where we have dumpster divers in these neighborhoods that we get a lot of complaints on throughout Fresno. So they'll be working very, very closely with sanitation to address those particular issues in those neighborhoods. And again, they'll also be working with our homeless task force. So those 7 officers are designated. 2 officers are being hired. At least 75% of their funding has been paid for by Fresno Unified. They're school resource officers. Those 2 officers are designated to be on the Dakota corridor near Blackstone, east and west of Blackstone, to work really around Manchester Gate, as well as, help me out, Fort Miller, which is just west of Blackstone. So those are designated positions, the 9. And then the remaining officers will be, we have the ability to utilize them for patrol or investigative purposes.
How many are those?
43 minus 9.
But are we in terms of the numbers that are shown in the budget, the increase, it says close to, I guess, 21 if you round it up, right? That's what we will see in this fiscal year?
So there'll be 34 additional officers that we will be utilizing. For example, of those 34, I anticipate 26 of those officers being assigned directly to patrol.
26?
26 of those 34. Yeah, but remember, the 4 that are assigned to FACS down in Blackstone, they'll be uniformed officers out in the field. The 2 that are assigned on Dakota, they will be out in the field. The 3 that are from sanitation, they will be out in the field. So there'll be an increased uniform presence, just those are designated in certain areas.
And that should hopefully relieve some of the other who are not designated to be able to potentially.
Yes, and the reason is simple. Anytime, we always would like to have undesignated positions because we can use them in a manner in which we need, fill in on minimum staffing or whatever the case is. But just their mere presence out in the field does deter crime, and they're going to be handling some of those types of incidents or preventing those types of incidents that ultimately end up making up a call for service for an officer. So there is a big impact whether they're designated or not.
And I will say that I'm supportive of the designations. I think that we've seen an improvement in the tower. I would like to see more. You and I have had a conversation about this, and so I hope that now with the increase in officer, we should hopefully be able to dedicate having 2 bike patrols in that.
2 additional, you mean? Because there's 2 currently.
Yeah, but they ride alone.
Right.
Yeah, so I would like to see 2 riding together, and then hopefully expanding the area, because right now they're just riding on Olive, 1 block north, 1 block south, and I will really say that in terms of with even the limited presence that they have, it's been really effective. There's been a lot of positive comments by the community, but I do believe, and I'm sure that my council colleague can speak to some of the comments that we do hear, because it is a corridor that is active. There would be substantial benefit from really looking at increasing that presence and extending the area that they actually patrol.
I look forward to being able to do that as well. Once we get our staffing levels, we attempted, as you know, to do it this year. We tried to add 2 more, but we ended up having to take them out of the minimum staffing. And so, in essence, what it did every night was put us ordering back officers to do that, and we had to be careful with that.
No, absolutely, and I totally understand. So I look forward to working with you to make that happen in this next fiscal year. So just want to get a sense in terms of timeline in filling some of the vacancies from my calculations. So right now we have 25 vacancies from what we're allotted. You said we're at 692?
Yes, we're actually funded in our budget at 710 this year, but we're allowed to hire up to 717 based on some salary savings from officers that are on long-term absence where they are on leave without pay. So it allows us to fund up to 717. So yes, we're 25 below. But in some respects, that number is a little bit misleading, and I want to tell you why. We've had accelerated attrition this year, thanks to the City Attorney's Office and Personnel Department, in being able to reduce the number of officers that are on our long-term absence. And those officers that were on our long-term absence from injury didn't necessarily make their way back to the field, back to work more timely. We were able to expedite their departure from the organization. So we have, last year, 38 officers left the department in 2014, either from retirements, terminations, whatever the case is, separation. So 38 left in 2014. Already this year, and we're not even to the end of June, we've had 36 leave. So much of that, I don't want to say much of that, but probably 10 or 11 of those individuals were on our long-term absence list for a long period of time. So at one time, we were up to 81 officers that were on our long-term absence list. As of this morning, we're at 52. So 29 fewer on long-term absence, but those are the officers that we've that have separated from the department. So when you look at realized bodies, where we're at as compared to 6 months or a year ago, we're not as bad as it may look on paper, but we still have a lot of work to do to hire to get up to where we need to be.
What do you anticipate in terms of timeline in getting to where we should be? I know you mentioned that in the next swearing in we will be almost there, right?
We're gonna be hiring 15 next week out of the June Academy. We're going to be hiring 5 more in July out of the Hanford or COS Academies. So that's 20 more officers. And as you folks know, when we hire those 20 out of the academy, it takes about 4.5 months before we're able to use them in the field because of the training program. So those 20, and now we know there's attrition. We anticipate 5 people leaving in July, and then we're averaging out about 3 leaving every month from that point forward, with a few months where there's going to be 2. We project those numbers. But we anticipate us losing about 33 officers in FY16. So, to answer your question, we're staggering the hiring, and we anticipate by the end of the fiscal year, depending on attrition, we'll be in at about 770.
770?
770 by July of next year, end of June next year. If attrition rates increase, that's going to have an impact. If we're not able to attract some of the laterals, that's going to have an impact, but we're not really relying too much on laterals. Most of ours is going to be academy graduates. Correct, Bob? Okay. And I will say it's important to talk about this recruiting challenge that we're having. I've not seen anything like this, and since I've been in the department, I think much of it has to do with the fact that many law enforcement agencies in California downsized significantly from 2009 on. There was no hiring. Well, a lot of folks that in the high schools knew that there wasn't job opportunities in law enforcement, so they changed their career paths. Now we're trying to get those people to change their minds again and come back into law enforcement. A second thing is you've got to have interest or desire to be a police officer. Second, you have to have the competence to be a police officer. And what we're finding is an incredible challenge there. We've this last month recruited, we had 4 officers that came to us from other agencies that left and either went back to their agency or decided we were too busy. And then the third thing is the character piece or the background. We are finding it more and more difficult to get people to be able to pass the background test. And I would prefer as an agency that we go short on staffing than to hire people that lack character, that are going to bring embarrassment upon this city. And so we're trying to balance all of those things today. And one of the reasons that it's difficult to get people interested in law enforcement is just turn on your nightly news and look at the cop bashing across this country and ask yourself, why would anybody want to be a police officer today to subject themselves to that kind of focus, scrutiny, and criticism?
So do you think that these challenges that you've just outlined are across the board with the other departments or mostly unique to our department?
I think they're unique to law enforcement, and they're not unique to Fresno PD. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department has 1,300 vacancies right now, police officers, and there's vacancies across the state of California. We are in a very competitive job market right now, and that's why the city manager authorized us to, this last year, to give a $5,000 bonus to those individuals coming to us from other agencies that are outside of a 40-mile radius, so that we could at least help them or assist them with moving expenses. We've front-loaded much of their benefits in terms of their vacation and sick leave, so that once they get here, they have those on the books. We've also started them at C-Step in our pay, and we may end up having to take it another notch up to D-Step. But I do not believe that those are the things that are necessarily going to attract the candidates we need. I believe it is going to be a, number one, it's an issue of whether or not people are willing to get into this profession for the right reasons. But there will have to be pay and benefits that get them here and keep them here over the long haul. And I believe that. And there used to be a time when Fresno PD was separated from other agencies in terms of pay. And that's not necessarily the case today, because if you go to Madera, I believe Madera, they get about $200 less than Fresno. And it's just not worth, the work in terms of coming to Fresno, where it's extremely busy. Officers out here handling 20, 25 calls a night. It's not like that in other cities. So it's a combination of things.
But it could be alleviated with additional staffing as well.
Pardon me?
That could potentially be alleviated with additional staffing.
Correct. If you get more officers in the field,
Then
hopefully it will reduce the workload, or at least allow us to get the calls more timely. You made some very good points about our response times. They're not where we need to be. Life-threatening calls for service at one time, we were under 7 minutes. Close to 6.5 minutes, and today we're at about 8.5 minutes. So we need more officers in the field. That's why we're putting officers out there today on overtime, so that we can get to those calls.
So with, if we fast forward to next June, you say that if we could, in the ideal, have the 770 hired by then, what does that mean in terms of our daily staffing? So right now, what is it in terms of how many on patrol?
It depends on the day of week, but generally at any given time on patrol, for example, on a swing shift, we're going to probably have 58 officers working in the city.
And that's patrolling?
That's patrol officers handling 911 calls, et cetera, and 4 to 6 sergeants during that time. As midnights come on at 9 o'clock at night, that number increases probably by about another 32 for the city. So during the day shift, like right now, there's probably 34 officers working in Fresno.
And so what would those numbers be with 770?
Well,
assuming that you get this to 770.
We would add, for example, if we added 25 officers in the field, and you spread those officers out 7 days a week over a 24-hour shift, it doesn't add a lot to your minimum staffing. So that could ultimately add maybe 4 to 6 officers on swing shift, and maybe 4 officers on midnights, and maybe 2 to 3 officers on day shift. So when you spread them out over 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, they don't go very far. But it's incremental.
Yeah, I just wanted to, just see what would be the difference in terms of the minimum daily staffing.
Right.
Okay.
Almost every day today, we order back officers because we're at minimum staffing or below.
Okay. And one other area that I had questions on, I think you to some degree touched upon when the other comments by my colleague were made regarding concerns of low staffing level in the Records Bureau. So maybe if you can speak to that, at least from my understanding and, you know, some of the things that I've heard, you know, we went from being available to the public from 7:30, from I think 7 days a week, 24/7, to now a limited amount of time from 7:30 to 2:30 p.m. What does that mean? What does that mean for accessibility to the public, right? Because in terms of customer service, I know, you know, most people work, you know, traditionally between 8 to 5. So what does that mean to them in terms of accessing public records? Also in terms of meeting timely response to the Public Records Request Act, the Public Records Act. I know that there's a time frame that we have to meet. Also, any timely notifications of any department actions to be taken. An example, towing notices, which we have a 48-hour period. I know that there's been some comments in terms of us having to pay some money back. So what does that mean to our department? And just adequate staffing for to really plan for attrition and, you know, people retiring. You know, what does that mean for our department? Are we planning for that? Is that a consideration? So if you can speak to some of those concerns.
Okay. Back in 2008, 2009, I believe we had 75 people assigned to the Records Bureau. Today we have 22. There was a tremendous impact on us. We had to go from 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, staffing the Records Bureau, to where we are today with limited hours, 7:30 to 2:30, Monday through Friday. It has had an impact on external and internal services. The external portion to the citizens, we had to find ways to continue to meet their needs, many of their needs, without having personnel. I spoke of the outsourcing of releasing of vehicles that are towed by officers. That had a tremendous burden on our Records Bureau at one time. 100% of that is now outsourced, so there are no long lines at headquarters. Another thing was our sex registrants used to come to headquarters and be registered sex offenders. We have made that off-site into a separate facility so that those people no longer come into records. People used to contact records for the purpose of obtaining police reports for traffic collisions. Those are now done through another vendor, outsourced. However, what we have found is that the internal impacts have been great in terms of mandatory reporting to the state on arrest report data, crime report data, hate crime data. Those things were constantly delayed on getting information to the state. And we receive letters from the Attorney General on a monthly basis about that. The other piece of it is internally, is that we rely heavily on crime statistics so that we, in our crime view system, so that we're able to make sure we have accurate crime data on trends so that we know when and where to deploy our resources and whether it is an accurate trend or not. There was a time in our department where the data was not as accurate as we wanted it to be, and it required it to be audited, and it took time. Well, by the time it was audited, it was too late to recognize the trend and deploy resources. So we shored all of those things up. Today, we're finding ourselves back in that predicament, not to the degree we were, but still having to utilize overtime on weekends to make sure that that data is as accurate as it can be. So, yes, the simple answer is we are, our records manager believes that we should be at 40. We're at 22. I know he's taken some additional steps to further automate some of their arrest tag processing. So maybe we do not need to get to that point, but we will need to increase records personnel this year somehow even if it's through the use of salary savings to get there.
And how many do you believe would be a good starting point to begin to help with the number of challenges that you mentioned, the mandatory reporting, crime statistics, plus we have the issue of people retiring too, right? And the time it may take to train an individual to get to a place where they're an effective staff.
Yes, I know virtually all but maybe one, I think, of our records people today are over 50, and many of those are in their 60s, and there's going to be quite a bit of attrition. So I have authorized our folks to hire, working with personnel department, hire in advance of those people leaving so that we can have an effective transition. I don't know what the number is. But whatever that number is, they would have to be utilized in a priority fashion in the department to shore up some of the things. I don't know if that number is 8. I don't know if it's 10. We still need to finalize that.
And maybe an idea would also be that over the next year, we really look at what would be the most appropriate staffing for the department. I know you've mentioned, I believe that we've done a lot in terms of looking at outsourcing some of these things that the department or that division used to do. We're also looked at, technology, automating some things, but probably looking at a plan to really have that division staffed at an adequate level where we are meeting not only our requirements required by the state or feds in terms of our some of those, like the PRA and so forth, and any other mandatory reporting that we may do, but also for the satisfaction of the customers that we serve, right? And really turning around the reports in a timely fashion. If people are dealing with an insurance claim or they have a case before the court, timeliness is always very important. And so, both, I believe, for internal and external purposes, it seems like we need to really start looking at how we begin to restore this division.
Well, the priority for the organization, what has been very helpful in the mayor's proposed budget for the FY16, is hiring 6 property and evidence technicians. That was the highest priority we had in the department for civilians, and the reason was very, very simple, was that we were getting backlogged on evidence and the ability to maintain it. And then the other was the information service, 3 information service folks, two network system specialists, and so forth. So those individuals were important for us to hire as well. And again, we've been fortunate enough to hire police cadets that are out in the field again. At one time, we had 77 police cadets and we went to 0. And now we're back up to about 40, I believe, in our department. Some of those are prisoner transportation. Others are the ones that are out there handling reports in the city. So it's going to be a gradual process for us to rebuild.
Of course. So I'm wanting to make a motion to add a few of the positions. I don't know exactly what that number should be to start, but I would really like to see this fiscal year our commitment or a demonstrated commitment to begin to look at restoring this division. So I don't know if it would be 3 or 2, and I don't know if I would have any support up here. So if we could do 3 positions to begin to show our commitment, and maybe really look at a plan as to what would be the adequate staff given the outsourcing that we've done and the automation on some of the required tasks. So looking at that over a longer period of time.
If it were 3 positions, it would be a senior secretary, senior records clerk, and 2 administrative clerks.
Well, I would like to make that motion. And I'm not sure if I have to make a motion on the tower on the tower issue, in terms of once we have the adequate staffing, obviously not to increase from what is proposed in the budget, but that we do designate having 2 bike cops ride together when they are present, and looking at expanding the geographical location that they now cover. So I'm not sure if there's a motion required for that.
So in essence, going from 2 to 4 at some point, 2 to 4 officers designated to the staff.
Within this fiscal year, this next fiscal year. I'm not asking for additional officers. What I'm asking is that from the pool that we do have, just as you've designated in the Manchester Center and so forth, and what we have now in terms of the tower, the 2 officers, increasing that to 4. So would that be a motion, or?
We can either do it as a motion, or the chief can do it organizationally. Do you need a motion, chief?
Well, that's, I'm going to look down at the city attorney, but the council does not have the authority to direct through me the allocation of staffing of the police chief and where the police chief assigns his staff.
We can encourage.
Well, we can talk a little bit more about that. There are ways we can recommend that, because
I'm just, if there's a request for us to look at, we can look at, but I can tell you, you cannot make a motion. Correct me if I'm wrong.
How about I do this without the city attorney getting involved? How about when the staffing levels get to, because I totally agree with the city manager. It puts me in a difficult position when council starts designating officers, and I already got 6 in the downtown policing unit, and I got some on fax and some on DPU, and pretty soon I don't have anybody to go out and handle patrol calls. So I think when we get to a certain staffing level, there is significant benefit to having an increased presence of officers in the tower. I agree with the fact I like having them doubled up. It's safer. They're more proactive. They're more visible. And so when we get to a certain staffing level this year, we'll take a look at how we can increase the size and go from 2 to 4 officers without impacting minimum staffing levels.
And just for the sake of the conversation, we did that last year, and there are times we do ask for certain resources from various agencies. So we can talk a little bit more about it offline, but I don't want anyone to think that it was completely out of line that she made that request. So, Chief, if you can handle it through normal operations, that'd be great, but we normally do make requests like that.
Yeah, I'll work with the city manager and Councilmember Soria to do that this year.
I appreciate it. Those are all the questions that I had. Thank you so much for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Councilmember Olivier.
Thank you, Council President. I wanted to, I'm only going to take about 5 or 10 minutes on this, but I think that my colleagues have kind of have been nibbling around the edges on this issue of the recruitment of new officers. Talk to us briefly, and I think you did already, but this is not something that just the city of Fresno is dealing with, right, in terms of the hiring crisis. This is an industry-wide problem, correct?
Yes, I believe, well, in just speaking with chiefs across the state of California, it is an industry-wide problem. And it is a challenge within the region, it's a challenge in the state, and it's more and more difficult to find quality recruits.
Right. You talked a lot about new recruits. What about lateral moves? Is there a way that, I mean, does our department encourage lateral moves? Do we go out and try and steal from other agencies, good people?
We do, and we have been able to successfully get those individuals. Some of those people, as I talked about locally, sometimes we'll go out to a smaller agency and we'll recruit those individuals who come to us highly recommended. And then after 6 weeks in our training program, they decide to go back to their other agency. Either their police chief from that agency wooed them back and promised them other things, or maybe the workload here is just too much for them to grasp, because we're very busy. We're probably one of the busiest departments in the nation per capita. And but we continue to do that. And then we used to recruit a lot from Madera. as well as Salinas and some of those agencies. But remember, some of those officers that are there are under the old retirement system, the 3% at 50, PERS has. And then for them to come to our system may not be as beneficial to them. I don't know.
I believe that the hiring crisis that we're facing is the greatest crisis that we face as policymakers here. I think that, what about bonuses? You've heard motions from me to paint a building. You've heard motions from other council members for some of their pet projects as well. What about bonuses? If we had to spend money, is Long Beach offering bonuses to lat moves or new recruits? Is Oakland attracting that way? Is there a way that we can create a pot of money for you and city manager to get together and recruit new talent simply because maybe here's a pile of cash for choosing Fresno?
Right. Well, you may not know, Councilmember Brand and Brandell and the city manager and us, we met in the POA, and there was a decision made to offer a $5,000 bonus, and we've been doing that this last year. We've only had to use it twice for those individuals that live within more than a 40-mile radius. I don't think that is the attraction right now. Maybe upping the bonus does work to $10,000. But I think what is going to get people here and cause people to stay is knowing that there is a sustained salary that is as good or better than where they're at. That's a challenge. That's a challenge for us as a city.
We have to hire 50 more officers. And
Correct.
And the 5,000.
We got to hire a lot more than that.
Okay. How many do we have to hire?
We're going to. The goal is to hire the ones that are leaving this coming year. So probably 90 officers in FY16.
Explain the bonus structure. It has to be somebody from a certain geographical area. Could we expand that to statewide and then make it 10,000?
It is. Well, currently it is if they live within outside of 40 miles. We made that decision because it was to really cover some moving cost. And it is open statewide, $5,000 to those individuals. It really is a policy decision by the council and administration in terms of whether that bonus should be more or what other incentives we're able to offer to get those individuals here.
If I could,
sure.
I've made it very clear to the chief that if and when he thinks he has to get to a point where we have to bump up the value, the bonus, whatever it's going to take to get officers here to Fresno, then he and I will have that conversation. But he hasn't come to me yet, and from what he's telling me, that he's been able to get quality people at the level of the bonuses right now. And as he pointed out, bumping it up doesn't necessarily focus on his character issue, which is his number one priority. So we are doing, I think, what we can. But as the chief pointed out, we've had individuals who've come over, and 30 days into being out on patrol, think, you know what, we're going back to where it's a little bit quieter, no matter what the pay rate was. So it is a challenge for us, not just in Fresno, but throughout the country to recruit for officers.
What is the reason why only 2 bonuses have been used and paid? I mean, what do you have to do to qualify for it? I mean, why are we only done 2? I mean, I'd like to do 50.
We're not getting the applications from those individuals. And I've had an opportunity to talk to some folks from other agencies. Part of it has to do with the fact that they're satisfied where they're at, in the environment that they're at, where there isn't the intense scrutiny that they may find themselves under in a larger city. Some of the officers in the Southern California area are doing really, really well on pay. I lost a police officer this year to San Francisco. Can't compare the cost of living to San Francisco to Fresno. It's far greater there. But he started out at $130,000. So he ended up making an extra of $60,000 a year, $50,000 to $60,000 a year. We're not going to attract people from San Francisco here. They're all making $130,000, $150,000. We are probably going to our best recruiting is going to be from some of the agencies like Sanger and Reedley and Selma, for those individuals that are willing to come here and are willing to take on that extra workload for the purpose of being a part of Fresno PD and having the ability to have more upward mobility, more ability to work special units. That's what's going to attract these people. The pay has to be good for those people to come and to stay. But I do believe that our focus is going to have to be on new recruits coming in this agency, putting our own people through the academy. And it's going to have to be where we're able to hire 25 in each of the academies, a minimum of 25 in each of the Fresno academies. That will give us the 50 a year. Our problem today is that we're having to catch up rapidly because we haven't hired in so many years. And it's growing pains this first year or 2 years. So, and that's why we're struggling, and we're having to rely so much on our cadet program and sending people through the academy. We have now the authority to go out and hire somebody out on the street, make them a cadet too, and put them in the academy. We didn't have that before. So that's a good thing. So I just think it's going to take time for this to work. Maybe we do offer a higher step coming in to laterals, where maybe they come in at D step. And maybe that's something we should have a conversation about with the city manager. But I appreciate, because you're right, this is the #1 issue facing us today.
No, I agree. It's the number. I believe it to be a crisis for our city and for our citizens, and so that's why I think that every comment you've heard here is a willingness to help from other council members. So although you're not specifically asking for it, I think that I think it's important that we go ahead and make that decision now in case you need to come for it. So I would like to make a motion that we double the bonus for new recruits that Chief Dyer can use at his discretion. So it goes from $5,000 to $10,000 for new recruits to bring them based on the criteria set by the city manager and the police chief and his staff for the incentive program. Okay.
Okay, we have a second, we have a motion, we have a second. Lee, did you want to make a very quick comment on it?
Yeah, I just want to say that myself and Member Brandow have talked to the chief and city manager extensively about this recruiting problem going back 3 or 4 months ago. And I don't believe the solution is simply, for the sake of argument, just doubling the recruiting. I think it's more complex than that. And I know we even talked about, when somebody has a job and they're 25 years old and making, say, $30,000, $40,000 a year, $50,000 a year, they've got to take off 6 months to go to the academy. And they have house payments and rent payments and car payments that, I know we're paying the tuition. We talked about possibly, you mentioned the Cadet 2 level, and even paying that person during that time so they could sustain their lifestyle and payments. So I think the broader issue really is a comprehensive program and not simply just 5,000, 10,000. Would you agree, Chief?
I do believe I don't know if this will help. We can try it. It can't hurt us. But I do believe it's going to be more comprehensive. It's going to be the total package. The pay package. It is the ability to take somebody off the street who's interested in law enforcement and to say, we know you're accustomed to making $30,000 a year, and maybe we can get you to $25,000 and pay your way through the academy, and then you become our officer, to get some of those individuals as well. So I do believe it's a combination of continuing to utilize our existing cadet program, hiring from the academies, being able to go out and handpick those individuals in the community, put them through the academy and pay their way, as well as going out and offering some incentives to people to lure them from other agencies to Fresno. I do believe it's going to take all of those things.
If I could say for the motion maker, if you could amend the motion to direct a full review of all incentives to resolve the issue, as far as instead of just 5 to 10,000, we say.
Councilmember Brand, I just want to ask really quickly, is that going to make it too broad and start really creeping into MOU issues or anything like that? I mean,
I don't know, but maybe it's premature to talk about. But I think it's going to be a combination of things. To simply say that the motion would be to explore all methods to resolve the issue, including financial bonuses.
Well, that's not what I'm asking for, though. I'm not asking for all measures. In this case, I'm interested in the hiring bonus. If that's a tool you think you can use, great. If not, then you can withdraw the second. And I didn't really see any interest from other council members.
And I guess I don't know why you need the motion, because it's already something that the chief and I have talked about, that if and when he thinks he needs to raise up the bonus to a higher level, then he can just simply have that conversation, and it's a done deal. But he hasn't had that. He hasn't reached that threshold yet. So appreciate the help, but that's an option we've already discussed.
In fact, in our upcoming ad in PORAC, I was just reminded we're going to bump that up to 10,000. So we knew your motion in advance.
I'll withdraw it then. Thank you.
I did not know that, though.
so you're withdrawing the motion?
It's already been done.
All right.
But I do want to say thank you. Not just to you, Clint, but everybody on the council for your interest in making sure that we're hiring the right people and having enough police officers out there. It's refreshing to me as a police chief to know that. And whatever other ideas, we're open to them with the city manager and myself, because, as I said at the beginning, this is new. This is new to us in terms of us not experiencing our inability to recruit officers. I don't know that this is happening in the fire department. They seem to be doing well in terms of when they open up a test, they get thousands of candidates. We don't.
All right, Councilmember Quintero. I'm sorry, Councilmember Olivier, was that your final remark? Clint? I'm sorry. I'm just sorry, was that your final remark? Okay. Councilmember Quintero.
Morning, Chief.
Good morning.
Still morning, yeah. Chief, I just wanted a couple things. I wanted to thank you for, and you're aware of the work that your officers do out on the streets and that type of thing, but in particular, because I work with them, the Southeast unit out there just continues to do a tremendous job with, all the dwindling resources that we've had. Specifically, they're very responsive on the whenever the issue of homeless comes up, that we have to ask folks to move on or just clear out, or that type, or arrests need to be made. But they're very responsive, and also the other part that they go the extra step in contacting a property owner to get more information on some of the activities, illegal activities that are going on. So they just go that extra step to make sure that that they're doing it the right way and being very careful. And then also, whenever they have the sweeps with the PD, the sheriffs, and highway patrol, we had an incident earlier this year over on in Sunnyside, actually, Kings Canyon and Argyle. There's all those apartments in there that part of it is county, part of it's city, and we worked with Mark Hudson on that as well. And I think they were able to do 5 arrests right in there, just in that one time they went in there, and that was kind of on the county side there, but they really did a great job. So I just want you to, whether they're honey badgers or sharks, they do a good job.
Thank you.
And Lieutenant Garza continues, like I said, do a great job and working very closely, continue to work closely with the senior housing that we have in the district. So they just do a great job in being responsive. Do you or will you be in this fiscal year hiring a new deputy chief?
We're in conversations with the administration. I am going to look over at the manager, but I will tell you this: we have, and it's I said it publicly. We haven't promoted a staff officer in our department in 8 years. Lieutenant, captain, deputy chief. And as a result of that, there has been some stagnation in terms of movement of staff. So we put together a comprehensive restructuring plan of the organization that we are working through some of those details today that will allow for us to promote at various levels in staff so that at some point we will have the leadership in place for succession. Okay. And so it is our plan, yes, in FY16 to be able to do those things.
So you do one promotion and then you got to keep bumping up then the other vacancies.
Yeah, we've during this recession we've lost so far we've lost 3 deputy chiefs, 3 captains, 7 lieutenants, and 2 civilian managers. And so it's time that we restructure the entire. Of course, we've lost a lot of personnel down below, so you don't need as many managers. But we still are lacking in certain areas, primarily at lieutenant, where our field commanders are. So we've got a restructuring plan that we hope to get in place in the next few months.
Well, from let's say a lieutenant on up, how many vacancies do you have?
Well, when you say vacancies, whenever the positions went away, we would eliminate them in our budget.
Okay.
So again, we went from 5 deputy chiefs, today we have 2. We went from 8 captains, today we have 5. And then I believe we went from 21 lieutenants down to 15. And then we lost 2 civilian managers during that time as well. So I really look forward to restructuring and being able to promote again in a big way.
The positions that you have right now on those levels, are they comparable to other cities our size?
In terms of the size of our staffing?
Yes.
No.
We're below, huh?
We're far below. We know that because we did a study about 2 years ago, and we were far below at that time, and we've lost staff since. So that's the purpose of us restructuring and being able to promote again.
One of the okay, thank you for that. One of the concerns over the years that just seem to keep going, and I know progress had been made or has been made, and that's the communications with the dispatchers, with city and county. How's that?
In terms of coming together, working together, same facility. I don't know where the Sheriff's Department is, but they were going to relocate from their current headquarters building out to where American Ambulance is in southeast Fresno. They were going to move into their facility, and American Ambulance is building their own dispatch facility. It's my understanding that has been placed on hold, and I don't know for how long. But we had a joint meeting, the city manager and I, with the CAO and some of our council folks and Board of Soups for the purpose of having a long-term plan. In fact, Council President Baines was there, and it was to put together a long-term plan for us to occupy the same building. And I believe that's still a good plan. I know Captain Reed is here. He oversees all of the communications center piece for our department. We're very tight in that facility. In fact, we're having to do some restructuring this year to add complaint taker stations or call taker positions. The state is paying for much of that, if not all of it. But at some point in the future, we're going to have to look at a joint facility, or at least expanding our facility. We know that. And we've even looked at going over to the Corp Yard because there's a broad enough facility there for us to move into, and it's existing. And we're having a study done, I believe, right now. Mike, is that true? To see if it meets the requirements of the seismic requirements, et cetera. So that would be a good facility for us to move into at some point that's already existing. And if the county wanted to be a part of that, they certainly could be.
So you're not where you'd like to be then?
What's that?
Sounds like we're pretty far from where you'd like to be.
Yeah, I think we need to make sure that we're taking care of our needs in the city. making sure that we have a facility that's large enough, and then work on the interoperability piece with the county. That's the first piece. If we move into the same facility, that's great, but the main thing is that we're communicating with each other, both on radio and data. That's the main.
That's the important part.
That's the important part, so we can talk to each other. Yes.
Okay. Then I'm going to ask the city manager a question, and I think he may have a little bit more information than that I'm looking for. City manager, on the we had been talking for a while about getting some property for a police substation in the Sunnyside area, and there was a piece there that Housing Authority owned. Can you give us an update on that?
We have sent a letter to the Housing Authority indicating that if the developer is successful in receiving, I think it's a cap and trade grant, that we will be acquiring the property from the Housing Authority at appraised value. The goal is that this grant will help fund the improvements on the property up to including the construction of a new police substation.
Okay, so we don't own the land yet then?
Not yet, but we have a contingency offer with the Housing Authority.
Well, it sounds a lot better than last year as far as a lot further along.
Oh, we're hoping to hear.
Plans are done too.
Yeah, we've done some preliminary site plans, and so I think we're close now to where I think it's 11,000 square feet. The architect can actually move forward and start giving us get us to about 30%, so we can get an engineer's estimate of what the actual construction would be.
Yeah, we've actually agreed upon the site plan, the floor plan, and the elevations, and those have all gone back to Scott Beck, their architect, and we've had a series of meetings, and we're ready to go once the land gets completed, and we're ready and look forward to it.
Okay, do you have any type of a timeline on that?
This fiscal?
Yeah, I think it's going to be contingent upon when we hear back, when the developer hears back from the state as far as their grant application. If they get the green light on their grant application, I think that's why we're running parallel paths, so that when they get the grant application, we'll be ready to basically enter into, we'll know what the costs are, and what we ultimately would have to bring to the table as far as tenant improvements, because what the developer will provide is a shell. So probably within the next 3 to 4 months, we should hear, or the developer should hear something. And then what will also happen at that time is, if you recall, we own property at, was that Olive, Belmont?
Belmont and DeWitt.
Belmont and DeWitt.
4 acres.
So we may have to sell that property to help fund the tenant improvements, but there's also the savings that'll come from terminating the lease for the southeast station that we currently operate out of. So we'll come back with a financing plan for this, but again, it's going to be driven by the how much the grant is going to pay for the facility. It's because this police substation will coincide or coexist with a BRT station at Fancher Creek.
Right. The just one thing to keep in mind too. I know the substation that we have on Cedar Avenue. I mean, it's very, very small for the uses that it has, but what I'd like to see is that if we do go forward with the new one, that we could keep that one as kind of limited for limited use or something like that. Just on that Cedar corridor, within a mile, you've got Calwa School, Vang Pao School, Sequoia Middle School, Roosevelt High School, and Winchell. You have 5 schools just within that corridor, and so they're. I know it's the presence there is just it's meaningful for the area and the neighborhood there.
I totally agree with you on that. We need to not necessarily abandon that location because the police presence is good. So we'll find a way to. I don't know what that is, but we'll find a way to make that happen.
If the city manager finds a lot of money, he can buy the Hanoians property. That's part of your substation. There's your communications, everything under one roof. And then you can rent parking to the fairgrounds when that rolls around, see? So got it. It's a one-stop shop there. Let's see. Okay, thank you, Chief. Now,
Thank you.
Just wanted to make a comment on reminding the council is that the motions and some of the things we're going to be looking at for the police department are really critical and important, and of course they cost money. And I know that that some of the motions that we've made on other departments, like the parks and all that, that comes from the general fund, and the request for the police department comes from general fund. So, okay, that should be interesting then. Okay, thank you, Chief.
By the way, your area there, your district, Southeast Fresno is the only one with a reduced crime rate, violent crime down by 8%. So, folks over there are doing a great job.
I know you did a good job, and Deputy Chief Navarez did a good job, and
long history.
Farmer, Reed, Guthrie, even
Long
Maroney.
You're dating
guys, they were the good foundation builders.
You're dating
for the
yourself.
district. You had hair in those days, Chief. I remember. Thank you.
Much of it too.
All right.
Thank you.
Councilmember Brandow.
Hey, Chief, I'm going to start by asking Jane a question, all right?
Sure.
Jane, on page B130, on the budget, up in the section under the graffiti programs, that first little column, where it totals up on the side and it says 96, 176, and 51, is the 96 possibly a typographical error, or am I not reading this chart correctly?
That's the, well, I believe that might be a typographical error.
Okay, that was just a little technical question I had. All right, Chief, by this point, almost all the questions have been asked. I want to go back to one thing that you commented on. It's not really specific about our budget, but Prop 47, is there any help at all coming in regards to modifying that proposition and how it's played out in California cities?
Well, I know that there's an attempt to tweak some of that currently in the legislation, but not an overhaul. And I don't know what it would take, quite frankly, to modify it, other than I believe at some point in time, as crime continues to rise, and maybe that is one of the things that is pointed to, that's going to have to happen. But so I don't know. I do not have the answer for how we can significantly modify Prop 47. I am all for the desired outcome of Prop 47 in terms of making it easier for people to get felony convictions off their record so they can become employable. I believe that's a good thing. The manner in which it was done is wrong, because it has not. We have never seen so many empty. Well, I don't want to say never, but we have more empty drug treatment beds today than we had in the past, and the reason is because there's no incentive for those individuals to take advantage of them, because the alternative is no longer a felony but a misdemeanor on their record, and many of them are just choosing to have the misdemeanor because that doesn't impact their employment.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, I know, and I've heard you talk about your views on Prop 47 several times, so I knew that you feel that that process was somewhat detrimental law of unintended consequences. Now, when you travel and talk with other police chiefs in the state of California, do you get a sense that there's a consensus?
Yeah, I've not ran into any California police chiefs that support Proposition 47 that are in office today.
Is there any effort underway by chiefs of police and even officers across the state of California to let to let Sacramento, our elected leaders, know this in any type of an organized way?
Yes, through the California Police Chiefs Association, state sheriffs, I believe there's been ongoing communication about, well, I know there has been ongoing communication about the impacts of the law, and the comment that has been provided to all of the chiefs and sheriffs at this point has been, it's too early to tell. Let some time pass. And so that's what's happening, and my fear is, as time passes, we're going to continue to see crime increase. And that's unfortunate because we're going to see people out there victimized that didn't have to be.
Right, yeah. Just craziness to me, but thanks for that overview, Chief. In the hiring schedule, you talked about the 3 DPU-funded officers for homelessness and homeless-related items along the Blackstone corridor. Is that correct?
The 4 fax officers will be the Blackstone corridor, yes. The 3 DPU officers will be citywide.
And do they go inside of the homelessness task force?
They will be supervised by the homeless task force sergeant so that there'll be a coordinated effort. And they'll be part of that task force.
Sergeant Dewey?
Yes.
And he's doing a great job, by the way.
Yes, he is. Thank you.
Okay. Now, in a technical question, so we're going to hire these 3 DPU-funded officers, and they're going to work underneath Sergeant Dewey's supervision in the homelessness task force. Do we, and I don't want to get in the business of your department, but I would like to know will one of these 3, 2 of these 3, or 3 of these 3, when would the first one of them be hired, or does that type of stuff scheduled out in advance? I don't know, but we're having almost immediate problems right now in the areas of these recycling centers, and I'm wondering how soon we can get some help with that stuff.
The goal for us was in August to hire the first 4 fax officers, and then October the 3 for sanitation. That was the plan.
Okay, so they're not staggered. Those 3 will be done by October.
The 3 will be the 3 would be hired in October, and then again in August would be the 4 fax, and then we have a plan to hire the others on a staggered basis as well. But that's those 2 categories.
Okay, fantastic. Let's see. So I also kind of just coincidentally related to my Prop 47 questioning, I'm going to have a resolution that comes up before council, I believe next week, that talks about letting our elected leaders in Sacramento know that when they put in the requirement for recycling centers at certain level of grocery stores in Fresno, there's a requirement that the state has mandated, and then when we fill that requirement, what the state never thought of is that in those areas, people go out and commit crimes in those areas specifically related to those recycling centers, and we're finding that out. All of my council members bring it up. It's something that I've heard an awful lot of unity on, and matter of fact, other council members have taken a much more aggressive lead at eliminating this than I have in Northwest Fresno, but it exists, and so we're going to try and let our state leaders know that sometimes when they do stuff, it really negatively boomerangs back on our city and other cities. So,
True.
So I appreciate that we're going to do some hiring that will help out with those types of problems. I guess the county's going to add a lot of new sheriffs. Is that correct? We just found out in their budget the other day.
Primarily correctional officers working inside the jail, and I do not know about how many deputies they're going to hire out in the field. I haven't heard that final number, but I'm not. Seemed to me that it was under 10.
Okay.
But the big hiring is the correctional officer, and we are finding that there's 2 distinct paths. People either want corrections or law enforcement. But we do compete with those people that are going corrections. Some of those would be very good police officers. So it does increase or impact our ability to recruit.
And I heard from a supervisor that I think they're also going to try to put together a bonus package that gives really close to ours. And so that's I share Councilman Olivier's concern. I mean, it's just, you know, we've got to get to the point where we can hire these officers. The real truth is, a year ago this week, or a year ago, we wanted to hire 17 new officers, and we've had a heck of a time getting those officers hired with all of the attrition we've had this week. So we've got to really pay attention to these opportunities and like how much of a bonus needs to really be thrown out there. I appreciate, I'm just going to say publicly, I appreciate your concern and your desire to hire officers that have a level of character. I don't want us to see in our desire to hire a lot of officers fast to hire potentially bad officers. So I do appreciate that. I wanted to say that. And so I believe that's all my questions, Chief. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Caprielio.
Thank you. Chief, you mentioned that recruiting is inhibited to a degree by the negative news that comes out seemingly every night. And it's really a tragedy. But to me, it not only affects the recruiting, but it affects the morale of your entire department. So I wanted to contradict that impression of the news by what we feel in Fresno, which is very, very positive. And without you and your entire department, top to bottom, left to right, all those involved, Fresno would not be as safe as it is today. So we thank you, we appreciate it, and I hope that goes out to all the public safety people that are here in Fresno, because it'd be chaos, and I'd hate to even think what it would be like if we didn't have you and the top quality people that you do have on the staff and the force now. So thank you so much, and we'll continue to stand behind you and them in every way possible. Absolutely.
Thank you. Appreciate that very, very much.
You're welcome. The couple other comments. Not asking for new officers, but asking again for additional presence in the areas of El Dorado Park and Sierra Madre. Sierra Madre is becoming, that's 1 block south of Shaw between Maple and Cedar, and it's becoming more and more El Dorado Park like before it became El Dorado Park. We're on the road to recovery there thanks to a lot of effort by a lot of people, but I hate to see Sierra Madre backslide into that position, and we've got two problems. The other thing was that in our last budget session, we talked about at least a police reporting area at Stone Soup. We used to have a substation there, and I don't know how we can get farther down the road, but I'd like to talk to you or direct me to whomever I need to speak with on that issue.
I would think Lieutenant Gross to make that happen. I honestly, I haven't kept pace with that. So that is not in place yet, I take it?
Correct. The prior person to communicate with is no longer with us, so that's kind of been a glitch in the process.
Okay. We will, I'll make sure that Lieutenant Gross follows up on that with...
I appreciate it. Thank you. And then maybe with the Cedar Avenue substation being improved by a brand new huge substation, that could be used as a business model for Stone Soup, or some of the things we've learned from that smaller substation on Cedar Avenue that was referenced earlier. Perhaps that can be a format for Stone Soup and maybe the Tower District. So we don't want to forget those areas, because it obviously made a huge impact when they were there. There were vehicles everywhere, and it really helped get us off the ground with refurbishing and upgrading and the progress we made at El Dorado Park. So thank you for everything you've done. And again, I want everybody and your staff to know that we are truly behind them, this entire council. I can speak for everybody, as well as all the people of the city of Fresno, especially District 4. So thank you so much, Chief.
Thank you very, very much.
Councilmember Olivier. Clint.
I think we've kind of danced around the issue a little bit, but I know a little bit of background from talking with you and talking with the guys from the association. Talk to the council, and I wish Steve were here, but talk to the council briefly about why new applicants are getting washed out before they can even get started. It's because maybe they got busted for pot use, or maybe they got busted for something. Why is it so hard to find? I mean, you encounter young people who want to be police officers, but they get washed out, right?
Yeah, I think there's a combination of things. Obviously, the purpose of a background investigation for law enforcement is greater than and should be. The scrutiny should be greater than any other, certainly any other job in the city of Fresno, because these are the people that we entrust. So sometimes they get washed out on psychological, where the psychologist does not feel that they're a fit or a suit for this particular agency. They may be for another, but not ours. And then there's an ability to appeal that process. I've seen some really good candidates that haven't been able to get past that psychological assessment. And then there's an appeal process, and then sometimes they are able to get through it and come to us. The other piece of it is, I don't believe that society today, the individuals in society today, really understand what we don't allow in law enforcement. And just because a person has used drugs doesn't mean that they won't be allowed to become a police officer. Because if that were the case, we'd be talking a lot lower than 692 officers today. We would be in maybe the 100s. But that's not going to be a determining factor to wash people out. What we do look for is the recency of inappropriate behavior. And if there is a time when we can see clearly that they made a decision to change, they were going this direction in their life, but they chose to go this direction, that's a good sign, and we will hire that individual. And maybe that period of time for certain things are 3 years. 3 years ago they were doing something they shouldn't have done, but today they're not. So we have had people apply for our agency that committed robbery. Those people aren't going to be police officers. People that have committed burglaries, they're not going to become police officers. Maybe there's some things that they did when they were juveniles. Maybe we were able to work through those things. So part of it has to do with character. I was just talking to our chaplain the other day about going into the high schools. And in every high school, their freshman year, and showing them the application that they would have to fill out as a police officer in terms of their background, and to know that there's going to be a polygraph examination. And maybe that would cause them to think differently about the decisions they make in high school. And maybe that's where we need to go, because the candidates we're receiving is a reflection of the society. And when you have the marijuana use out there today that is just overwhelming, well, we see those same people applying for us. And so those are some of the reasons in terms of the background.
All right, thank you. Well, finally, it's to me. I'll ask a few questions, make a couple comments. Most of my questions, quite honestly, have been addressed, so little need to rehash that. I'll open up my comments by saying thank you, Chief, by doing this marathon session right now. I think you've been up here a little over 2 hours. Other than maybe Darm, you probably have had the longest questioning. So I thank you for your.
And rightfully so.
Yeah. No, listen, we thank you for your patience. We know that, and I'm going to express the sentiment of all my colleagues and echo most of them. We all know how valuable this agency is to our city. We know that our officers do a great job with limited resources and have been for a very long time. We're happy that we are moving in the right direction. And certainly under your leadership and those of your key staff, we've been able to keep the city under wraps through some pretty tough times fiscally. So I want to definitely say we thank you for that. Thank the staff for that. And we know that we're moving back. We're moving back where we need to be. And now it's definitely time to make the proper investments. And clearly this budget reflects that. That we are moving in the right direction. Not quite where we all want to be. I'm not exactly sure we'll ever be there, but we are certainly moving in the right direction, and want to say that publicly. And I wanted to give you an opportunity, first off, to just kind of say a few of the things, your highlights of this year, maybe some things that just jump out to you, some things that we're really proud of, the accomplishments of this department, and maybe our viewers may want to hear.
Well, I am very proud of the fact that in spite of the downsizing of our department and the challenges we face in the criminal justice system, that we've had 4 consecutive years of violent crime decreases. A 4% followed by a 6% and 2 years of 7%. And I'm also very pleased with the fact that we've been able to reduce auto theft dramatically in our city. 24% last year, and we're already down this year 11%, and that's on the heels of other declines. Also proud to say that in 2014 we received our national reaccreditation from the Commission on Accreditation from Law Enforcement Agencies, and not only accredited with excellence, which meant we complied with all 484 standards, but we also utilized the gold standard, which was a higher standard, the highest that you can receive. And I'm very pleased with the fact that we've been able to continue to reduce our fatal collisions in our city, although we're challenged in 2015. We've had remarkable success, about a 39% decrease in injury collisions in our city since we expanded our traffic program. And also very pleased with the fact that we've been able to have some technology enhancements in our department. This year we will be opening up in fact later this month, the Real-Time Crime Center, which is 100% private funding for this center. And we'll be sending out invitations to the media, to the council, to the mayor for this. And also the deployment of body-worn cameras on our officers, which I have mixed feelings about, quite frankly, because I hate to see us as a profession have to get to this point where the word of an officer is no longer as it once was. But I'm proud to say that we will have all of our uniformed officers equipped with body-worn cameras by the end of this fiscal year. And of that $2.6 million to fund that over 5 years, $500,000 of that is private money, and $1.1 million of that is grant money. And thank you to the council for funding the $200,000 per year over that 5-year period. And that, as you know, will not only provide body-worn cameras to our officers, but replace 400 of our electronic tasers that is out in the field, which is certainly an enhancement in the safety of our officers. So I'm very pleased with the things that are going on in this organization. There's always going to be some hurdles and some challenges. But I thank God that I work in a city that loves its police officers. And I hear reports every week of citizens that pull up next to traffic officers, motor officers, who write a lot of tickets, by the way, and get a thumbs up. Or for the countless stories I've heard of officers going into a restaurant to eat or have coffee, and an anonymous individual buy them their lunch or dinner in Fresno. And I am so thankful that I do not live in cities across this nation that are having the level of civil unrest that we do not see in Fresno. And as you all know, and you were part of this article with the Washington Post highlighting the successes of Fresno in our community policing efforts. We are so different in Fresno than any other city in the nation. Bringing Broken Neighborhoods Back to Life has been an incredible program that has fully engaged our police officers with members of this community. And we have block parties and events occurring every week in our city, whether it's in Southeast, Southwest, Northeast, or Northwest Fresno. And I'm proud to be the police chief of an organization that really cares. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to say that we have a great staff. We're not as mighty in numbers as we used to be in terms of volume, but we are still out there working very, very hard, and few but mighty. And so thank you for that.
No problem, Chief. And you actually walked right into one of the things I wanted to compliment you on publicly. And it really is this department's relationship with the community. I always like to take the opportunity to remind people that it's intentional and it's not accidental when you have that type of relationship with the community. The reverse is true too. When you don't have the relationship and you experience civil unrest, that's a series of non-strategic interactions that result in that. So I want to make sure that, that we put it on record that I at least recognize for sure that it doesn't happen that way by accident. I know your efforts personally and those of people in the organization that ensure that those community relationships and the solid foundations are in place. I would certainly say that as we move into this new era of policing, that we continue to stay ahead of the curve. And not that you would even contemplate this, but we don't rest on our laurels, that we're always pushing the envelope in that aspect because, none of us are going to be here forever. So we've got to bake that into the culture of the department in this city, that we are about the community, and that our chief, no matter who that person is, and our council and our mayor, no matter who that person is, always takes that serious. So I would just say that I'm hoping that we're figuring out ways we can bottle this up and make sure that this is the lasting, legacy and embedded in our culture in this city with the police department. And that's not always easy to do. No. Because, quite honestly, and not to embarrass you in any way, a lot of it's driven by you because of your personality and who you are and your care and concern. So we got to make sure that is baked into this organization all the way through, from the top to the bottom, no matter who's at the helm, because our city is going to rely on that. So, yeah, thank you for that, Chief. Just a couple quick questions. First of all, I want to echo a comment Councilmember Soria had, with the revelation, and thank you for bringing into focus the problem that we have in our records department. You can remember for many years that while I was, since I've been on the dais, I've always said, yes, it's important to have, sworn police officers on the street. It's equally as important to have support staff. They just, listen, it's a marriage. One doesn't work without the other. And it's important for the community to recognize the reality of that, and also this body too. That a lot of emphasis is placed on what people can see visibly in a sworn officer, but it just doesn't work if the support internally doesn't exist, and it is really the infrastructure isn't there. So we need both. Thank you for really outlining the necessity of that. So I would certainly be supportive of that movement should the council decide to go in that direction. You talked a little bit about some of the recruitment challenges. And I'm wondering if you were kind of talking about, 2009, students graduated from high school and maybe City College and those areas weren't interested anymore in being in law enforcement, because we weren't hiring for one thing. Now we fast forward, 6, 7 years, 5, 6 years later, where the national mood for law enforcement isn't as positive as it's always been. Have we thought about maybe having like high school recruitment programs and maybe City College and college recruitment programs, in the sense of, I know that there are some cities, and I think Clovis does this, where they have a way where high school seniors are exposed to police officers, whether it's on the job training, not on job training, but there's maybe an Explorer program or something to that sense, just to get that interest back into the young people in our community, so that they can move into back into law enforcement. Hopefully, make recruiting a little bit easier. Starting earlier may prove to be better. So I just wanted to submit that. If we're not doing that, obviously now's the time to move back in that direction. It's a long-term investment, of course, but I think, again, baking some of these things into the culture for us could be good. I wanted to ask a little bit about the violent crime. You said it was up 16%, and I may have missed, because you may have answered this already. What do you attribute the steep rise to?
The two areas, robberies are up in our city considerably, both business robberies as well as street robberies.
And you know what? Let me ask the question I'm getting to, because you did say that. Are we talking about more of an increased gang element, or this organized gang activity that we see, or is there some type of nexus that we see to some of this activity, I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
On the business robberies, we're seeing crews of 2 or 3 and yes, those individuals are in gangs. And then and the other thing that's driving that, obviously, is methamphetamine. The folks that are addicted to meth are the ones that are involved in many of the robberies that we're seeing. The other is on the street robberies, is just opportunity of people that are driving through, walking through Fresno. Maybe they're on their iPhone or iPod, or maybe they're wearing a necklace or something of that nature, or having a purse, and 2 or 3 folks in a car jump out and rob them by force or fear. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that
for just something so small like an iPhone. I mean, literally, they're just taking an iPhone and that's it and running. I mean,
that's it.
Wow.
And using force to do it.
Sure.
And in all 4 policing districts. And in many of the districts, we just had our monthly crime view meeting and looking at the patterns. Well, we know the patterns are, we have some that are occurring up on Kings Canyon and Southeast, some that are occurring in Belmont, just north of the core, but north of the Lowell area. We have some that are occurring up on the Shaw, both east and west of Blackstone. So we've put together a suppression plan with plainclothes officers as well as uniformed officers to target those spots. We also have some individuals that we believe are persons of interest for those robberies. So we're attacking them, but we hadn't seen these numbers in a long time. The other is the increase in shootings. We had 3 consecutive years of decreases in shootings. And unfortunately, this year we have about a 20% increase. We have 150 shootings this year compared to 130 this time last year. So unfortunately,
and we attribute most of that to gang. Is that mostly gang activity?
I would 75 to 80% is gang related in our shootings.
Okay.
Generally.
Right. And that's staying consistent with the increase we've seen this year?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I did read something encouraging that our officer-involved shootings are down considerably over like the last 18 months, right?
We've had 1 officer-involved shooting in the last, it'd be 8 months on the 20th, I believe.
Right.
And so those numbers are down. Prior to that, we were averaging not quite 1 per month. 3 years ago, we were 1 per month, and then it went down to about 10, then 8, and then now we've had 1 in the last almost 8 months.
Right, which is a significant decrease and really going away from what's the national trend, I think.
I think there's 2 things that contributed to that as well. One is certainly training. We implemented a mental health training this last year, end of last year, that was very significant, where we brought in a mental health professional, a commander, as well as a person suffering from mental health issues. And we provided training that really opened up the eyes of a lot of our officers. And so that, as well as, and I have to say, I think the national climate has had an impact as well.
Okay. Really, I think those are really all I wanted to touch on specifically. Like I said, most of my colleagues answered in great detail some of the other questions I had. So again, I'll really close my comments by just saying thank you for the service. Really thank the officers on behalf of a grateful council for protecting this city. It's not lost on us. It may seem like it is sometimes, but it's really not. We are very, very grateful for the service that you all provide and want to make sure that that's effectively communicated to our men and women of the force. Thanks, Chief.
I just close by thanking the city manager, the budget office, and the mayor, as well as this council. And this is a very, very good budget for us. We have not seen a budget like this in many, many, many years. And all of you recognize that. This is going to give us an opportunity to start to rebuild our organization with sworn officers, meeting many of the equipment needs, the fact that we've been able to have an additional 100 or replace 100 police cars and 50 more this coming year. 150 in 3 years is significant. City manager is responsible for that. Replacing our motorcycles and adding the sworn personnel. And I tell you, the mayor has been very, very understanding and receptive when we have presented why we need this to start adding these officers back. And and just the equipment that we're going to be bringing in, and some of the civilian personnel, the 6 property and evidence technicians is huge. The network system specialist, community system or computer system specialist, just a number of things. This is a very, very good budget. And so I just thank you in advance, and hopefully we'll be able to move forward as proposed. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Finally, I'm going to allow public comment on this, but I completely forgot one area I wanted to address. Chief, you can take a seat because it's really not directed towards you, but I wanted to just talk really briefly about a couple of areas in the city, and that's specifically the Tower District and the El Dorado Park area. And it really is kind of just for context for my colleagues to always remember that sometimes there may seem like there's added services in this area, but I just want to remind you all that at one point there were police stations in both of those areas, and they were taken out. And so the level of visibility that was once there in these very unique areas of the city is no longer there. And I worked in both of those stations, and I can tell you that it's a pretty big deal to go from seeing, 50 cops in your neighborhood every day to nothing. Not nothing in the sense of there are no patrol officers or anything like that, but the presence and the visibility is severely deteriorated to what it once was. So I think in light of just Councilmember Soria's discussion about trying to get a couple more bike officers there, it really is just trying to bring some level of visibility, return the level of visibility that was there that no longer exists at all. And the same thing with, El Dorado Park. We took the substation out of there. We did a pretty good job of housing the motor officers in there for a while, but now I think we've even taken the motor officers out. And I know we'd like to, if nothing else, we tried last year to get a report writing station there again or some type of visibility. So it really is just about giving these areas a little bit of visibility that used to have them. So that's really what that's about. And I just wanted to put the discussion in hopefully in a broader context. It's all about visibility. So I'll allow some public comment on this. I think I have anybody from the public wishing to comment on the police department's budget.
I just want to appreciate the council members and the chief for supporting our request. However, I would like to make a clarification. It really should be senior admin clerks. They're the ones that do the CLETS entries and release the public, the records reports. Another thing that was not touched on, they touched on the internal service. It wasn't mentioned about public safety. CLETS is extremely important. And there have been some mistakes made in the last couple of years. One that I know of was a stolen vehicle that wasn't entered for 3 or 4 days. And that is a significant public safety issue. If you're driving a car that was stolen and was recovered and that has not been taken out of the system and you get pulled over, you're going to be pulled out at gunpoint. So we're talking about issues like that. For senior admin clerks at top step for a full fiscal year is only $216,000. The liability issues would be a lot more than that. Something else, yes, a lot of things can be automated. A lot of things cannot. They have to actually redact information from certain reports. They have to know when reports can be released and not. When we're talking about some of the reports, the reporting things for the automated report company that's releasing that, if you have a traffic accident and you need that information to get your insurance claim paid, we're about 4 to 5 months behind. So that's impacting the public and their pocketbooks. Because if you don't have the time to be able to take off work and go down and stand in line at the records department to get your report, or you can't afford a lawyer that will go and do that for you, your insurance claim is going to be taking longer. So that's impacting the citizens' safety and their pocketbooks. So I just really would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other members of the public that would like to comment on the police department's budget?
George Hostetter, reporter, Fresno Bee. I'd like to extend an invitation to each of the council members individually and to the mayor to meet with editorial page editor Bill McEwen and executive editor Jim Boren and discuss your individual viewpoints about how the Brown Act works. And once again, we're going offline to talk about public policy, and the B disagrees with that. Thank you.
Do we have any other members of the public that would like to comment on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the dais. Our next department is the Office of the City Manager.
All right. The Office of the Mayor and the City Manager begins on page B31. This is a generally funded department. Its total budget is $2.4 million for next year. This is by and large a static budget. There have been some expenditure increases, primarily moving the 5% of the Assistant City Manager's time that was previously charged to CDBG has now been moved to the general fund. And there is also a full year costing for the Community Coordinator position, which was added last year. Balancing that out is the elimination of an administrative clerk position that was previously used in the enterprise zone. That enterprise zone has now ended. It will have ended in this current fiscal year, and so that administrative clerk is no longer needed and is slated for elimination. Everything else is pretty much the way it has been in prior years, and so that concludes my presentation. And there is staff here to address your questions.
Thank you. Bruce, do you have any other comments? All right. It seems I don't have any questions from the Office of the City Manager and Mayor. So we'll move on to the... You already... Well, I have a few questions now, G. No, I'm kidding. We'll move on to the Office of the City... We'll move on to City Council offices.
All right. The City Council budgets begin on page B37. And as you can see, they are fairly status quo. There is $50,000 in discretionary funding that has again been assigned to each council district. Also, to be noted is that each council district received a 5% increase in appropriations, which equaled approximately $12,500 for each district. And so you can see those in your total budgets. Also, the carryovers that you have estimated have also been worked into the budget. There will be a reconciliation of the actual carryover versus the estimated carryover in September. So any monies that you do not expend, that you do not expend this year, that you had planned on expending this year, will be rebudgeted to the council districts probably sometime after the books close, I would suspect in September. And so that concludes my presentation.
Councilmember Soria.
So just have a question. I know that I've previously, in sitting down with you guys, going over my specific budget, one of the things that I would like to request, because I know that when we spoke about how you guys estimate some of the costs that you guys charge, they reflect the 3 prior years in terms of the charges that you guys made. And so I've just got newly sworn 6 months ago, and I think that it would be much more appropriate if it would be the true cost reflected. If we look at Council District 2, Council District 3, and so forth, in terms of some of these charges, like the InfoSystem service charge and the InfoSystem equipment charge, I have the same number of staff. I know that my predecessor had additional staff, I believe 4 people, correct. And so I would believe that in fairness, in beginning my term, it would be much more appropriate to charge the true cost of the expenses that I have, given that I don't have as many staff members on my team I know it may seem like it's only a couple $1,000s, but a couple $1,000s can help me fix a sidewalk or repair a street light and so forth. So I would like to make a motion to ensure that for a fiscal year 2016, the costs that I'm being charged for these are actually true cost and not the average of the 3 former years per what my predecessor used to have.
Second by Councilmember Brando.
Jane, for clarification, when it comes to information services, that's an overhead charge, so all you would simply do would be reduce the overhead and reallocate it.
Yeah, that cost will be reallocated citywide.
Right, so your budget would just go down. It wouldn't provide a savings.
Well, the budget will, in essence, because that charge will go down, and since each one of the council districts is equal, since that charge is going to go down, then there will be some additional funding for that particular council office, because they are all funded at exactly the same level.
I think that it makes a difference.
It's just going to get reallocated to everybody else, is what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I very much appreciate that.
Not at all.
All right.
I'm sorry.
You're done? Okay. So really quick, and obviously this, I'm the council president, so I have some questions about that budget, and this is going to impact my colleague in District 4 next year. But in line item on B40, we have the $10,000 that kind of cover the whole year for.
Let me go over to my desk.
No, go right ahead. Sure. Yeah. Really, you could have just stayed there the whole time, Jane.
On page B40?
Yes.
Okay.
So let me get to it as well. So we see how there's the additional $10,000 for District 3 and District 4.
Yes.
Now, is that $5,000 each or $10,000 each?
I believe the total is 10,000.
10,000 each. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay, just wanted to get that clarified. So, and the breakout is, and how do they break that out with salary and expenditures?
Well, we don't really break it out. It's just, it's just a lump sum.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I like to do is, for the office of the council president, I'd like to make a motion that we add $10,000 to the office of the council president budget, really just for food and stuff like that. I can tell you, no, we don't. So that $10,000 really just doesn't go to, it's just the salary and regular costs, but we actually dip way into our budgets for the food to serve you guys. We all do, but it just comes out of your normal budget. You don't get anything extra for that. So what I'm trying to say is we have a standard and a practice where we provide food for the meetings.
It's just assumed that inside of that pot of money.
Yeah, but it's not. Thank you. We can talk about it more during the budget delivery. But yeah, you didn't get any extra money for that there, President Emeritus. So you could have. Well, I'm hoping it works. All right. So that's my motion. We'll have a second. I have Councilmember Soria's up now.
I want to clarify in my motion, I know that I just mentioned the ISD cost. I want to just make sure it's for across the board in terms of the charges that we get based on the status.
The interdepartmental charges.
Yeah, so if it's computers, phones.
Okay.
So if we can amend the motion to be inclusive of that, again, just going back to my argument, I have less staff. I'm not expending as
So
much
for
as
those
my
items that are
predecessor.
based upon a prior year history.
Yeah, and I think we could probably look at some of the other council offices that have the same amount of staff. I've gone through their budgets, and their budgets are much lower in terms of the expenses. So
Okay.
if we can just
Okay.
do that, that would be great.
Is that approved by the second?
Okay with my my clarification on my motion? You had second.
I have seconded. He's trying to purposely confuse people. I think mostly he's confused.
Motion that you second.
Yeah, what did you just change it to?
I just make sure that the cost across the
reflect
board
the
are true,
actual.
true costs for my staff.
For your office,
Yeah.
council, yeah, I am in my second.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that looks like all the questions we have from council members. I'll now take the council budget out to the public. Do we have any members of the public that would like to comment on this? All right, seeing none. Councilmember Brandow.
All right, Jane, although I just mentioned that Councilman Capriolio was confused, unfortunately and rarely, now it seems like I'm confused. So tell me about this spending money for council district breakfasts or for breakfasts before council when you're the council president.
Well, let me help Jane out. She doesn't know that we do that.
Who knows that?
We do. So, because it's just part of our infrastructure budget.
So are you going to answer my questions then?
Yeah.
Okay, so last year I bought these guys, and I bought these guys breakfasts every year. Yeah, right. There was not a gal here last year.
I know, I understand it. I was there, right.
And these all consumed my breakfasts, okay?
Yeah.
And what I want to know now is, in the light of what you've brought forward, if I could be reimbursed.
I think the statute of limitations is ran on that.
But so what is the story? I was under, as council president, I thought that was part of the money that was allotted to the council presidency. That's what that money was for.
Actually, the money traditionally has just been for the council president's salary, but that's it. In the past, we have had the council president, the office of the council president, not only had a higher budget but additional staff person to even do that work. So over the years, that's all been gone away. So what happens is we now charge those expenses, all of the extra, stuff we have to sign, the stuff we have to go to, the food, and the whole thing that comes with the office of the council president. There's no extra money for that in our budgets. So I'm just correcting that.
How much? So you're just correcting.
Yeah, I just think
You're adding additional money.
Right, just for the office of the president, though. Just that year, while you're the council president, so you can do those additional. You can have the budget to do those additional duties without impacting your already set infrastructure budget that really we use to serve our constituents with. So this is really just because we serve each other.
Okay, and then you're increasing it by $10,000. So there's an increase on the council president's salary.
Right. That's right. And then the infrastructure of the council president increased by $10,000 for those items.
Okay, and you had a second from
Councilmember Capriolio.
Vice President. See, doesn't that sound suspicious? Okay. All right. Thank you for clearing that up.
All right, Councilmember Soria.
I did want to make an additional motion. I forgot about this, but I know that we are allotted $50,000 for infrastructure, and so I wanted to actually make a motion to increase that by another $50,000. I've spoken to our city manager about an issue that I have in my district in terms of alleys, and then there's a cost to that. There's illegal dumping that are issues that sometimes in my area we need a little bit more funds, trees, sidewalks. And so I think that there's a benefit with having those infrastructure dollars. So I would make a motion to increase our budget by $50,000.
Second. All right. I second. Yeah, I second. So we have that, and it's been seconded.
And there was a second to that? Baines. Was there a second? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember Baines. All right. I will now close down the office of the City Council, and now we'll entertain any additional motions that have not been made. We have today and tomorrow. These conclude all the department hearings, but we can still make motions up until tomorrow. Okay, I have a few motions to make, since I don't see any other council members punched up. So the first one is I want to recognize the $2.6 million in federal transportation grant funds from Caltrans for major street paving projects and direct staff to provide the list of paving projects utilizing the $2.6 million prior to budget adoption. We're going to allocate the $2.2 million in state transportation gas tax funds toward the Fulton Mall for the Tiger Grant match for the Fulton Mall reconstruction project. All right, that's mostly a procedural issue that we need to do, that we have to do the budget process. Thank you, Councilmember Brand. Then I'd like to make a motion for a $100,000 citywide industrial assessment and compatibility study. It's a motion to do a citywide industrial compatibility and assessment study. 100,000. 100,000. Yeah. I'd like to add $15,000 to the city attorney's office to cover any costs associated with public environmental assessments triggered by internal city proposed ordinances and policies. And this really is something that I learned this year from, and all of you may have realized that whenever we initiate something internally, there are basically ID charges that come with that. And we want to make sure the city attorney's office has the appropriate money to cover those little additional charges, whether it's CEQA or anything like that. I don't know if you wanted to add to that, Doug, but we know that happens.
That makes sense.
Okay. So, do I have a second? Okay. Well, it was Paul. Thank you. All right. So, all right. Those are all the motions I have for today. And then tomorrow we will entertain any further motions, and then Friday we should have the full. Oh, I'm sorry, I do have another motion. And Friday, I'm going to make one more motion. Friday we will we will vote on the adoption of the entire budget with all the motions. After Wednesday, we decide which motions will be included into the budget. Hold on one second. I have Councilmember Capriello.
On your first motion, is it 2.6 million Caltrans dollars, and you want $2 million for matching Tiger Grant?
Right. $1 million from the fund and 1.2 million from 2012, and then 1.2 from 2020 from Fund 20103 toward the Fulton Mall for the Tiger Grant match.
So what's the total amount you're seeking?
2.2.
And what's available?
2.6.
And what's going to happen to the difference, I wonder?
I don't know. That would be determination made by the
District 6?
by the administration.
Is that a form of a question?
Yes.
What was the question then?
If we have 2.6 Caltrans dollars and Council President seeking 2.2, what happens to the $400,000 that's left?
Well, what it actually is, and we'll provide the detail, the state has informed us that they're going to increase our obligation authority to $2.6 million to fund projects that were previously going to be funded out of gas tax. They're doing this as their commitment to us to provide or identify a source of funds to match the Tiger Grant. So they're giving us 2.6 to do those projects, which frees up $2.2 million in gas tax.
Originally, I thought it was $2 million from us, $2 million from the state, and 16
It's
million.
about, that's close. We're getting the other $2 million, about $1.8 million from Measure C TOD funds.
Thank you very much.
And my final motion will be to grant $200,000 to the Fresno Arts Council so they can administer their programming. 200,000. Medley. Councilmember Brand.
Just clarify, in your motions, with the one exception on the mall, those are all just without offsetting any specific fund, correct?
Right.
Okay. Do we come tomorrow or not?
We do.
8:30?
Tomorrow we'll be here and we'll deliberate all of the motions, so we'll get the final list tonight.
Okay, but the vote's not till Friday?
Right. So what we'll do tomorrow is we will deliberate all of our motions. So the list may be up to 14 or 15 motions now, maybe, I don't know. And then what we'll do, we'll take them in order, and we will deliberate each one, and all of them will have an up or down vote. And then when we have a final reconciliation of all of our budget motions, we will package that and send it over to our finance department. They will put together what we will come back to us as a final adopted budget.
And Jane, will you have that ready by this afternoon so we can review
The
it tonight?
motion list, yes, we will.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you should. The budget office has been pretty good. I mean, finance office has been pretty good about getting that list to us pretty much the afternoon that we make the motion. So, colleagues, you should have that list to you, the final list, probably sometime this afternoon. And tomorrow we'll deliberate all of them and just to kind of go over it. Yeah, we will. So tomorrow we will vote individually on all the motions. So, and then we'll decide which motions actually make it into the final budget. And then the budget office will tell us how they've impacted the budget and bring to us a final adopted budget, to a final budget to adopt. And we will do that on Friday.
Yes.
The budget will be voted on, the final budget will be voted on Friday. All right? So, council, we're all good? We're clear? All right? All right. Second. All right. We'll stand in recess till tomorrow.